Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about some second-year breakouts for fantasy football in 2021. I'm going to be discussing 5 players, 2 running backs, 2 wideouts, and 1 quarterback from the 2020 NFL draft class that I feel as though are going to take that big leap in their sophomore year at the NFL level for fantasy football in 2021. But before I get into the breakdown of these 5 players, I'd like to ask if you do end up enjoying this video at any point to please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, us at Awesemo are going to be putting out videos every single day to help you guys win that 2021 fantasy football championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new or not, please consider hitting the like button to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people.
Especially because I started doing football content this week. So I've started diving into the football season, but I'm not quite ready to do best balls.
I haven't dove into too much. Kind of just, I think I have an edge from drafting, just using other people's rankings and
stuff. It is the Awesemo MLB Deeper Dive. Greg here, joined by Shit My Money, Adam Scherer. Today's show is sponsored by JockMark. If you guys are new to JockMarket, new way to play DFS. They've got MLB contests. They had NBA, not anymore because NBA season's over, but still PGA ongoing. NFL obviously will be coming up also. Just different way to play DFS where instead of building lineups based on any sort of salary or building an actual lineup, you're bidding on players if they're an IPO and like it's a stock market. So you go sign up and you could use the promo code Awesemo and the deposit bonus. I should have looked at this before. I just realized I wasn't sure. It's different every time, but it is $50 if you're making your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo. Get a $50 match deposit bonus over at JockMark. Different way to play DFS. So, Adam, we have an 8-game slate today. And before we go through the game by game, a little more time and we could take a little more time because there's only 8 games opposed to some of the other slates we've had. Any just overarching views you have for today's slate?
I think today is sort of similar to yesterday. There's some similar spots where I think that pitchers that are good or pitchers that are good plays are also facing offenses that are good plays. Not quite as extreme as yesterday because there are a couple of pay-up pitchers that I think are in pretty good spots, or at least decent, relatively good spots. Whereas yesterday it was kind of like every pitcher that was talented on the slate was in a pretty difficult matchup. So I think pitching is a little bit better today, but it's still kind of a similar slate to me where I'm going to be pretty interested in trying to leverage against what the field is doing and, get bats against popular pitchers, et cetera, because I don't think that there's that many spots that are just like slam dunk plays today.
Yeah. And I mean, even something we've seen a whole lot recently anyway, is that a lot of pitchers that used to be slam dunk plays kind of haven't been this year anyway, other than Jacob deGrom, but he's hurt right now. So somebody we haven't had on the board recently who's basically been about as safe as possible over the course of the season. But let's jump into these games. First game we have on the slate to talk about is the Atlanta Braves playing in Philadelphia to take on the Phillies. It is Charlie Morton going up against Matt Moore. Now, starting with the Matt Moore side, basically every time that Matt Moore is pitched, offense have been extremely popular against him. By the way, also, guys, you want to check out some of the ownership for the stacks. The MLB Top Stacks tool is free over at Awesemo.com. And today is going to be no different. We do have the Braves as tied right now for the most rostered offense over on DraftKings with the Tampa Bay Rays, both of them picking up 15.3% projected ownership. So I know you'd said that you're looking to stack some of the popular offenses less popular offense against popular pitchers. Are you looking to do the inverse, maybe get to a little bit of Matt Moore against a very popular Braves stack?
I don't think I can go that far. I mean, he's projected to be underowned, I guess, like with a 6% top 2 pitcher percentage, only 2% ownership. But I doubt that I get to him, or if I do, I doubt that I get much. It's just such a tough ask, I think, for him to have a good game here. 20.6% strikeout percentage is reasonable, and that's about the last reasonable number that you get to for Matt Moore. 1.88 home runs per 9 this year, 11% walk percentage, 5.37 xFIP, gives up power to both sides of the plate. I don't think I'll be going that far off the board.
No, neither will I. And there have been spots where I've done it this year where I've gotten to some pitchers who generally are not great and are against offense that could be popular. Like yesterday, I rostered a decent amount of Matt Manning just because he was cheap and nobody was on him. But I can't do it with Matt Moore today. Matt Moore has just not only been terrible for a while, but it's a very extended amount of time that he's pitched poorly. Last year, sat out the season. 2019, he only pitched a total of 10 innings. And then you go before that, 2018 is 6.79 ERA, 2017, he had a 5.52 ERA. We've also now seen him on, 7 different teams in the last 6 seasons or something like that. There's a reason he hasn't stuck in one spot. So it is definitely hard for me to reason Matt Moore, no matter how chalky the Braves get, within reason, obviously. If the Braves were to like 70% on, then I feel otherwise. But we do have the Braves as a massively negatively leveraged stack today. And that's also something that's been the case in every single Matt Moore start so far this year. The Braves are the most negatively leveraged stack on DraftKings. On FanDuel, they're one of the most negatively leveraged stack teams. So it's clearly a good spot for them against Matt Moore. But are you doing anything to differentiate Brave stocks, or is it just something you're looking to be underweight to the field on as a whole because of the popularity?
Yeah, I mean, the way it looks right now, I'm expecting that I'll be using Braves bats, but using them kind of mixed into less popular stacks that I get to. I doubt that I'll have too many full Brave stacks, especially in larger field stuff. I do think it's a very good spot against Moore, but I think you can attack them by just, also, grabbing 1, 2, even 3, mini stacking against them, hoping to get a couple of home runs there. And then doing so allows you to have more open roster spots to get low-owned players. So that's typically the approach I end up taking in a spot like this, where I think it is a very good spot, but they are also projected to be over-owned. And one last thought on Moore, and talking about it from a leverage standpoint, the big reason why I end up not doing it quite as often or quite so much with pitching is even when an offense is over-owned, like Atlanta is projected to be, they're still only projected for 15% ownership. So I just don't really think that going to a pitcher and saying, I can knock off 15% of the field. Like if Atlanta were 40% or something, then sure. And then also the thing is, like, the Atlanta stack can fail and Matt Moore can fail pretty easily. Like Atlanta can score 3 runs and Matt Moore gives up 3 runs in 4 innings. You don't want either one. So it's just a little bit more difficult than when you go the opposite and take a stack against the pitcher.
Yeah, the spots where I think it makes the most sense, like you said, is obviously the pitcher going against popular pitchers for leverage. The other one too is just on smaller slates. So there's no real need to do it on an 8-game slate. I kind of found a need to do it last night just because there was no cheap pitchers to roster at all. And if I wanted to save salary with any pitcher, it just had to be somebody who was bad, who was going up against an offense with some ownership. But for this particular slate, I don't really see a need to do it. The ones where it really makes sense to me is like, hey, we have a 3-game slate and a pitcher is 5% owned and one of the offenses 35, 40% owned. But that isn't going to be the case today. But looking at some of the individual Braves hitters, there are some guys who are lower owned. We have Orlando Arcia is only projected for 4% ownership. Dansby Swanson's surprisingly only projected for 12% ownership. Guillermo Heredia, he's no good, but he's only projected for 7% ownership. I do think there are ways to make contrarian Brave stacks here by rostering some of these guys towards the end of the order that don't have all that much ownership. Is that a path you are willing to go down, or are these players just not good enough for you to really want to get exposure to?
Yeah, I mean, they're cheap too. So like Heredia is not great. Arcia is not great. Kevin Smith's not great, but he's a catcher. So yeah, I think that is one path you can also take is, use a couple of the good Braves bats and then get to those guys. The problem is that, you do also have to keep in mind that those guys aren't nearly as good as the hitters in the middle of the lineup for Atlanta, who actually are pretty good. The other thing I mentioned this morning, and it's not the case, like they're getting ownership right now anyway, but I was kind of hoping they wouldn't. But Freddie Freeman and Jock Peterson in the lefty-lefty matchup, a lot of times we see people kind of shy away from that in their stacks. There is absolutely no reason to here against Matt Moore. He's given up power to lefties this year. He's given up power to lefties basically his entire career. So, and the field isn't shying away, which is disappointing to see. But my point is you shouldn't be like Xing those guys out of your Brave stacks or anything. They're still very good plays.
Yeah, Jock Peterson currently projecting for 16% ownership and Freddie Freeman coming in at 19% ownership. So I do agree with you. That is something where we see an ownership discount a lot of the time because people just don't like those platoon matchups. But Matt Moore is crappy enough that nobody cares. So like, hey, I'm willing to roster lefties, righties, switch hitters, pitchers. If they got fantasy points for hitting, they'd probably be looking to roster them against Matt Moore here. So overall, good spot for the Braves. just if that ownership is as high as it's going to be, it doesn't really equal to what their odds are being a top stack. So team I'll have in my player pool, not an outright fade, but I'll be underweight to the field on them. On the other side, we have Charlie Morton on the mound for the Braves. From a fantasy standpoint, he's been really excellent this year because the strikeout stuff has been really good for Charlie Morton. The matchup against the Phillies isn't ideal, but still, you look at some of the strikeout stuff for Charlie Morton, 27.7% K rate this year. Also, the numbers overall in terms of run prevention have been solid, 3.69 ERA, 3.8 expected ERA. So on a slate where there aren't that many pitchers to look at, Charlie Morton is currently projecting for more ownership than any other pitcher on the slate. Do you think that's warranted?
Yeah, I was actually surprised this morning. He was projected for, I think, like 25 or 26%. And I was surprised it wasn't higher at only $8,700 on DraftKings. Then you also get this Philadelphia lineup. Their implied run totals dropped nearly a half run since this morning because you have Travis Jankowski in place of Andrew McCutchen. You have Andrew Knapp in place of JT Realmuto. Odubel Herrera is in place of somebody. I'm not 100% sure who off the top of my head. But the point being, this lineup is a bit weaker than it normally is. Morton doesn't have drastic splits. It's not an issue that he's facing, an extra left-handed hitter or two in this lineup. He has struck out 30.6% of lefties this year, 25.9% of righties, 129 expected ISO to lefties, 117 to righties. He's just been good across the board. I think that he's underpriced here.
Yeah, and on FanDuel, he's actually the second most popular starting pitcher. Sean Manaea picking up the most ownership. But either way, Charlie Morton's the pitcher who I'm going to end up getting a lot of exposure to. He's going to be one of my most rostered players on the slate. Just at the high end of pitching, the pickings are pretty slim. We've got Walker Bueller against the Giants. That's going to be a strong option. A lot of people be on. Sean Manaea against Seattle. I think he's fine, but he's going a little bit over-owned. Charlie Morton in that price range. And then you've got, Anthony DeSclafani in a brutal matchup in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. Ken Maeda against the Angels. And Maeda struggled a little bit this year. There just aren't that many pitchers to get to. And that in itself just has me on Charlie Morton. For leverage purposes, since he's going to be so popular, this is something you talked about at the top of the show. Are you willing to stack the Phillies against him? They do have one of the better power offenses in the National League.
Yeah, it's not my favorite spot to get to as far as the popular pitchers go, because Morton is typically just someone that even when he has bad games, normally it's a result of balls being put in play, just kind of finding holes, and he doesn't give up a lot of power. He keeps the ball on the ground. So it's not my favorite spot to go to, but it is a 40% owned pitcher pitching in Citizens Bank Park in Philly. There is still power in this Phillies lineup, even though they're resting a couple of their more dangerous hitters. So I don't think I'll get to tons of Philly, but they are projected to be a little bit under-owned relative to their top stack percentage. And they do offer you leverage against nearly 40% of the field. So I assume that in 150 max, I have some Philadelphia, but I don't think they'll end up being one of my more popular stacks.
Yeah, it is. Currently, if you look at the top stacks tool for the Philadelphia Phillies, we do have them about appropriately owned. I'm actually surprised they're picking up this much ownership for as popular as Morton is and somebody who is known to be a good pitcher. 4% ownership going to the Phillies. That actually doesn't make me all that interested in them. If this is a spot where the Phillies come down in ownership to where they're like 2% owned or something like that, I think that's a little more reasonable. I'm surprised the field is getting to them.
They're at 2 now. Refresh.
Oh, okay. There we go. Refresh. Did I call for the number to do what it is? And then it just responded. So the Phillies now. All right, yeah, now the Phillies are projected for 2.3% ownership. Look at that. I said I don't really want to roster them at 4, but I would at 2, and then ownership update comes in, they're 2%. So yeah, I don't mind getting to like 3 or 4%. Philly stacks in that case, a little bit of leverage and get overweight to the field on them against a popular Charlie Morton. Are there any individual hitters from the Phillies lineup that stand out to you?
I think it's kind of the obvious. Bryce Harper looks good because the thing is with Morton, a lot of times with good pitchers, you still kind of can predict where they potentially run into trouble. Morton, it's more so if he has his stuff, he's just good against both sides of the plate. If he doesn't have it, then of course it's good for everybody on Philly. So it makes it more so I'm just interested in either good value or good hitters. So that basically gives you Harper, Hoskins, and Gene Segura, I think is the guys that look the best.
Yeah, and Segura to me has been a little bit too cheap over the last few slates. He's also been leading off for the Phillies, so that's also always beneficial. Next game on the slate, we have the New York Yankees in Boston take on the Red Sox. It is Jordan Montgomery on the mound for the Yankees, Tanner Houck on the mound, and I'm not sure if I pronounced his name correctly, but he's on the mound for the Red Sox. Jordan Montgomery, I know that he's a pitcher that you have said that you like at points in this year, although there hasn't been a slate where he's really been set up with a good matchup. And this spot is really no different. However, FanDuel, I wouldn't consider Jordan Montgomery. As an SP2 on DraftKings at only 7,400 with 3% ownership, is there enough strikeout upside in Jordan Montgomery to consider him even in a tough matchup?
He terrifies me here. But to what you were saying, I feel like every time I talk about Jordan Montgomery, it's like, I think Jordan Montgomery is a decent pitcher. I think he has pretty good stuff. It's a brutal spot. I feel like that's been like every start he's made for the last like 2 or 3 years. And this is the same thing here. I understand why you could, like, I see the argument for Montgomery. He's only $7,400. That's a price range that is useful on this slate. And there are popular pitchers in that price range, that Montgomery offers a pivot to. He isn't a bad pitcher at all. He comes in with a 24% strikeout percentage, 4.1 xFIP. He's a pretty decent arm. He struck out 23% of righties this year, 195 expected ISO. I understand the argument. It's just really, really tough for me to get there in this spot when you just have such a dangerous Red Sox offense going up against him. It's, again, I can see getting, over the 3% projected ownership in large field tournaments. But if I don't, I wouldn't even really be upset about that either, because I think it's just such a tough spot for him.
In the build that I made before we did the show, I had 6% Jordan Montgomery. So more than the field, it's not a significant investment. But this is another spot where, it's a low-owned pitcher. There's a little bit of upside there. If he ends up coming up in projected ownership, then it's not something I'll get to. But just somebody who's this contrarian as a pitcher with a little bit of strikeout upside, I understand the matchup is absolutely terrifying. I mean, I stacked the Red Sox against Robbie Ray last night just because I like the spot for basically Boston whenever they're lower owned, and they were not expected for much ownership against Robbie Ray last night. Today is different, though. Today we have the Red Sox picking up a whole bunch of ownership going up against Jordan Montgomery. I think Montgomery is solid. I don't really think this kind of ownership is warranted. 9% ownership for the Red Sox on FanDuel. On DraftKings, they're projected for 12.5% ownership. So the third most popular offense on the slate behind the Rays and the Braves. So at this kind of ownership, I'm going to have very minimal amount of exposure to Boston.
That's what I'm expecting too. And I mean, it scares me because I would prefer Boston be projected to be underowned, and then I can just roster Boston and, really like the lineups I make because Boston has such a scary lineup. But with the way with the way ownership numbers look right now, I just don't anticipate getting to a lot of them because Montgomery is a decent pitcher. 195 expected ISO to righties isn't great, but it's not terrible. And you're just getting a lot of ownership going here. I kind of mentioned at the top that I thought it was a slate that didn't have a lot of like slam dunk plays, and that's pitching and offense because you look at the top stack tool and there's one team, Tampa Bay, with a double-digit top stack percentage. Atlanta, 9.4% is second. Boston's third at 8.7%. But like half the slate is at 5% or above. It's just a lot of teams that have very, very similar chances of being the top stack. And as you always do, you're just getting concentrated ownership in a few spots. So it's not going to feel good. Like, it's definitely going to be a scary slate if you are underweight to teams like Atlanta and Boston. But I think especially in large field tournaments that it's just, if you do that, if you're consistently making these plays over the course of the entire season, you have a much better chance of taking down a tournament than if you're not. You're trying to like outrun the field by playing the most popular offenses.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too that's important when looking at the Red Sox, and once again, the top stack tool that is free today over at Awesemo.com, is there are a bunch of teams with nearly identical top stack odds to Boston, just significantly less ownership. So we have the Angels, for example, 7.9% chance to be a top stack compared to 8.7% for Boston, but Boston's picking up 2.5x the ownership. The Minnesota Twins, same situation, same odds pretty much of being a top stack, but they're picking up 8% ownership as opposed to 12.5. So I think all of these teams in this range, they just make for good pivots off of Boston as long as this ownership holds. So to me, of the teams that we have with these kind of odds, the Red Sox are just the weakest one to stack because of the high ownership going there. But on the other side of the game, we actually have even more ownership going to the Yankees against Tanner Huck. So the Yankees offense, which is largely disappointed this year, we know that they've been dealing with the COVID situation. So they've had, by the way, do we have a lineup yet for the Yankees? I'm curious to see what it looks like today. We do. So it is still a really weak. I cannot believe this Yankees team is picking up this much ownership today. So this is who's batting for the Yankees. They have LeMahieu in leadoff spot. Stanton's batting third. Brett Gardner second, Odor is fourth, Gleyber Torres fifth. Then we've got Brantley sixth, Greg Allen seventh, Florial eighth. He's a good prospect, but whatever. And then Tyler Wood ninth. This is a terrible lineup. I cannot believe this team is picking up this much ownership. Extremely
bad lineup, and it's not like they have a great matchup either. Tanner Houck's a reasonable prospect for Boston. He's been fine this year. The only real knock on him, the only reason that I'm not that interested in playing him in DFS is that I don't expect him to go more than 3 or 4 innings based on what he's done recently at AAA and in his most recent appearance in the majors. But from a strikeout standpoint, he's been fine. Like he doesn't set up as a pitcher that I think is likely to turn hitters like Rob Brantley and Greg Allen and Tyler Wade into good hitters. So, yeah, the top of the order is fine. LeMahieu, Stanton, Odor has power. Torres may or may not still have power. He homered yesterday. They're okay, but no Judge, no Voit, no Urshela, and a spot where I think you have a decent starter going 3 to 4 innings, and then you just have a bullpen game, which is never that appealing anyway. I'm really surprised by the ownership going to the Yankees, and I don't anticipate being there.
Yeah,
and so I'll clarify. I understand why the ownership's going there. It's because of the value. Like Brett Gardner's hitting second at 2,500. Rob Brantley's hitting sixth at 2K flat. I get why they're getting ownership. Even Stanton's 4,300, so he's cheap. Odor's cheap. The whole lineup is very cheap, so that's why they're getting value. But I think that in terms of their chances of being the top stack, they're going overrepresented, and I don't anticipate being there.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, and by the way, also on the pitch counts for Huck, 49 last time out, and then 58 2 starts ago, and that makes it very hard to think that he's going to work deeper into the game. The other thing too is his pitch count went down by about 10 pitches last start from the start of 4, so it's not like they're building up and having them throw deeper into games. And yeah, with this Yankees lineup, I get they're cheap, but what are we saving money for today? Pitcher. Like, I get this is a good spot for Walker Bueller, but beyond him, I mean, Sean Manaea is fine at 9,600. I'm not dying to just put him into all my lineups. So, like, I think my favorite points per dollar pitcher player we'll talk about later is probably Luis Patino, and he's 6,500. So if there's cheap pitching I like today, and, like Blake Snell, high variance pitcher, maybe there's some upside there. He's only 7,800 on DK, 7,500 on FanDuel. There's cheap pitching I like today. I don't really think there's a whole lot I need to save salary for with the Yankees. Like, I'm not valuing a stack for this particular slate just because they're cheap.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. One thing I will mention is you mentioned how Tanner Houck's pitch counts. The two starts ago in the majors was from like April, but your point still stands because July 10th, he threw 3 1/3 innings at AAA. July 4th, he threw 4. He hasn't gone more than 4 innings in a game since that April 18th appearance against the White Sox.
Yeah, so that in itself, if we get word that he's going to throw 70, 80 pitches, then fine, fire him up. But as of now, he is not my player pool. I do not expect him to be working very deep into the game. Next game that we have here to talk about, it is the Padres against the Marlins. Blake Snell on the mound for San Diego. The Marlins, I don't think they have an official starter named yet, but Zach Thompson is expected to work in relief. He could just end up starting also. Zach Thompson, somebody who I expect some heavy regression to be coming from the rest of the season, but starting with Blake Snell, what do you make of him in the second half of the season? Because I still think he's talented, but he is really stuck this year.
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea. That's kind of where me and Eric landed earlier, because you already have sort of like Snell being an enigma anyway, because his pitch count gets elevated so quickly. He has so much trouble going deep in the games outside of his best games. But then you have that situation where he was scratched from his start, I want to say against the Rockies a couple of weeks ago, because he didn't have like the arm strength. He had dead arm basically. And then he comes back against Washington, goes 4 innings, walks 4 guys, gives up 4 earned, just a terrible start, throws 74 pitches. Snell is talented. He has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate other than Zach Thompson at 28.2%. He's also walked 14% of hitters this year. I think the salary alleviates some of those concerns, and the matchup against Miami is good as well. The park is good. So I'm interested in Snell. I anticipate being around the field on him. He's projected for about 29.5% ownership on DraftKings. I'll probably end up around there. It's just not a spot where I anticipate taking a huge stand one way or the other, because I think that there's a lot of uncertainty and things that I just don't know the answer to as far as how he is health-wise, what the Padres are really planning on doing with him, how deep they would let him go today. Like, my assumption is that if he's pitching well, he's going to just go as deep as he can, but that's not a guarantee. And, again, just health-wise, I think there's some questions here too. So I'm fine, getting around the field on him. I don't really want to be drastically underweight either, because I think if he were healthy and we knew that, and everything looked good, he'd be 9,500 against Miami. So I don't want to take some crazy stand where I'm like underweight on Blake Snell at 7,800, but I also don't really want my night revolving around Blake Snell when I have really just no idea what to expect from him.
Yeah, it's so weird because the drop off. The other thing too is moving to the National League from the American League, not just the American League, but he's been the American League East for forever. So he's faced such tough competition between the Yankees offense and the Red Sox offense over the last few years. You would just think you throw him into the National League, and that in itself would just all of a sudden make him a better pitcher because he's going to be facing pitchers instead of DHs. But it doesn't matter if he can't throw a strike. So high variance pitcher, I definitely think he's worth having exposure to in tournaments. I kind of want to stack the Marlins just for leverage purposes on the other side too, because it's not like Blake Snell instills any confidence whatsoever. The Marlins right now picking up almost no ownership as a stack. We have them going 1.9% projected ownership as a team right now. Not that I want to make them a core part of my lineups, but just making a few Marlins stacks just because Blake Snell is so popular and he's frankly been terrible this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it'll be a big part of my lineups, but I would expect to get there. Kind of like we talked about with Philadelphia. It's still a low probability spot, and you're getting, around 30% ownership on Snell. The top of the order, I think, is relatively appealing. The bottom of the order, not so much. The park really isn't. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's only an 8-game slate, so the opportunity cost is a little bit lower to using some lineups, probably wasting some lineups on Miami.
Yeah, it's still, they're just so low owned, and there's so much variance with Snell. I'm going to look through some of his game logs. Now, when is the last time that Snell even had a legitimately good start? Like, I think there's so many slates where I just have him on my player pool because of the name value. But all right, so he pitched reasonably well against the Dodgers three starts ago.
His last monster start was in June against the Mets.
Big start against the Mets. But other than that, we've seen him give up 7 runs against the Rockies. Oh, that was in Colorado, though. But I mean, it's all over the place. Like, these box scores are absurd. 0.4 fantasy points, 10.8, 21.1, -11, 6.2, 39, -6. So he had 3 starts in a row where he scored -6 fantasy points, 39 against the Mets, and then 6 the next time out. I still think there's talent, but there's just no rhyme or reason to whether he's going to be any good on any individual night. So I think this is a very highly volatile GPP spot. I want to be on both sides of it.
He's like a higher upside Chris Paddock.
Yeah, kind of. Although, I mean, yeah, there's probably less floor than Paddock also, because Paddock has had some like miserably bad starts. But yeah, I mean, it's a Padres rotation that looks like it should be really good on paper, and then just hasn't really been the case so far. Certainly, the offense has been what's powered the team. And then even Yu Darvish struggled a little bit lately, but. On the other side of the mound, Zach Thompson is going to be pitching the bulk of the innings for the Marlins. I just have no belief in Zach Thompson. He's had good results so far in the major leagues this year with a 1.93 ERA, 3.56 expected ERA, 2.45 FIP. That all looks really well and good, but it's only in 28 innings. The reality with Zach Thompson is that he's 27 years old. He's an unrated prospect in the Marlins organization, and he's been bad for a lot of his career in the minor leagues. So even in AAA this year, which it was only 15 innings, but he had a 6.6 ERA. Then in 2019, in 70 AAA innings, he had a 5.5 ERA. I don't think Zach Thompson's any good. I think he's just kind of been lucky to have pitched, reasonably well through 28 innings. Either that or he's just, been okay during that stretch. I think it's all going to come apart for Zach Thompson. The question becomes, number one, do you agree with that? And then number two, do you think that the high ownership on the Padres is warranted today?
I think I'm higher on Thompson as a pitcher than you, just because there's a pretty drastic change from like 2018 on in a lot of his numbers in the minors. His strikeout percentage skyrocketed, 24.7% and 24.4% strikeout percentages at high A and double A in 2018, 28.6% at double A in 2019, 24.9% at triple A. And then this year at triple A, 30.4%. His xFIP's like half of his ERA in the minors as well, 3.85 at triple A this year. 403 last year 2019 at AAA, 273 at AA in 2019. So I think he did make some sort of improvements with the White Sox before coming to Miami. And then, I mean, he's been good so far this year, obviously, with the 29.2% strikeout percentage. xFIP is 3.83. I think there's a pretty good chance that he's actually a good pitcher, but I still have trouble with him here because 1, it's a tough matchup against San Diego. 2, he's expensive at $8,900. And then 3, he hasn't really been throwing a lot of pitches this season. He had one game where he threw 87 on July 4th. He had a game against Washington on June 26th where he threw 91. But in his most recent game against Philadelphia, he went 4 innings. He threw 60 pitches. Prior to the game where he threw 91, he had gone 73, 66, and 55 pitches. And then the fact that they are opening with Bender today instead of Thompson, to me, it just signals that you're likely to get like 4 or 5 innings as opposed to 6 or 7. So I have trouble paying this salary in this matchup when there's question marks about the playing time. And even though I disagree on the talent level, it's not like I know the answer. So there's still certainly a question mark there too about how good he is.
Yeah. And by the way, let me see if this is true. It's because somebody in the YouTube chat said that Jordan Holloway is expected to be the long reliever. I saw Zach Thompson earlier, but I'll double check that just to make sure that I dot my P's and Q's there. But while I'm checking that,
actually, I'm seeing Holloway now too.
It was definitely Thompson.
Yeah,
before the show, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean the blurb on DraftKings is from like 5:07.
So okay, so it was after the show started. So yeah. All right, well, this is going to change everything now. Let's look up Jordan Holloway's numbers. And by the way, this is also going to totally change our ownership and whatnot. But thanks to who pointed that out in the chat, that was Ted Nugent, 81. Thank you very much, Ted, because that is appreciated. Because when we started it and I put all my information in the spreadsheet for the show, Zach Thompson was expected to be the long reliever. But as for Jordan Holloway, Holloway's delivered pretty good results this year, although I also don't think he's going to work very deep into the game. He's made 3 starts this year, a total of 11 appearances. He's only thrown 30 innings, 3.0 ERA, 3.16 expected ERA. So I know we haven't had a whole lot of time to really break this down or think about this, Adam, but my feeling is if the Padres are going to be popular and Jordan Holloway is going to be, maybe a long reliever and a majority bullpen game for the Marlins, I don't know this is a great spot for the Padres, especially not one that warrants the kind of ownership they currently have.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I kind of don't hate paying $6K for Holloway. It's not my favorite thing to do, but in larger field tournaments, I think you can use him as a pivot. He's been he didn't start either of his last 2 games on July 7th or July 16th. He ended up going 4 1/3 and then 5 innings through 60 and then 72 pitches. Only 6K on DraftKings. Comes into this game with I lost it, but I think like a 24.5% strikeout percentage, which is obviously good. It's a risky spot. He's also walked 13.5% of hitters, which is very bad. But it's a risky spot, but I think you're going to get a lot of ownership going to Luis Patino, who should get a lot of ownership. I think we both agree there. You're going to get ownership going to Andrew Heaney in that price range. I think that, we kind of talked about, like, if we got word that Tanner Houck could go like 70 pitches, we'd be somewhat interested. That's how I feel about Holloway here, because I think he can go around 70 pitches.
Yeah, and just follow up when you said we're 24.8% K rate for Jordan Holloway, so certainly solid metrics there. But going to be interested to see when we get an ownership update where the Padres end up falling, because I don't think this is a great spot for them, and they are popular, but who knows? Maybe this could end up changing. But now we get to talk about the guy you just mentioned, somebody I mentioned before, Luis Patino, one of the top overall pitching prospects in baseball. He has really, really good stuff. He's also extremely cheap today on FanDuel and DraftKings. In the initial builds that I did, Luis Patino was my most rostered player. His results at the major league level haven't been great. It's only 20 innings. He's also been a little unlucky, though, because he does have a 4.87 ERA, but only a 3.51 expected ERA. He's been done in by a 55% strand rate. So really bad sequencing has led to bad luck. But still, I mean, a guy who 95.2 average fastball velocity this year, even at the big league level, even though he struggled, 27.6% K rate. I really like Patino, mostly based on just his stuff and his acumen as a pitching prospect.
Yeah, basically the way I view Patino is there is downside risk here. I mean, the Indians have a 4.5 implied run total. He has had some issues so far in preventing runs, but like you said, I agree. I think he's been unlucky. The strand rate is low. His expected numbers, expected ISO numbers are fine. So I think his stuff's really good. The strikeouts have been there. I think that he's just mostly gotten unlucky. But whenever you're talking about, a pitching prospect coming up and you don't have a large major league sample, there's always some risk there. But I think the salary just basically mitigates all of that, because it's not like we're talking about a pitcher that doesn't strike guys out and that you're kind of like praying that he has success, even though you don't really know how he's going to do it. The guy's got good stuff. He's been getting strikeouts in the major leagues, gotten strikeouts in the minor leagues. He's one of the top prospects in all of baseball. He was the key piece in the Blake Snell trade with San Diego. He's just, he's got good stuff. The Indians are a good matchup. Even though Jose Ramirez is back in the lineup, that's a little disappointing for Patino. But I just think that the salary sort of outweighs any concerns that I have. And then also, he's getting ownership right now at about 24%. But given his salary and the potential upside here, I think that's pretty low. We have him as the third highest top 2 pitcher percentage on the slate. So while 24% is a relatively high, raw number, it's not high enough that I'm looking at it thinking he's under-owned. If you were to get up to like 40, 45%, then I might say, okay, I'm going to, back away from Patino a little bit. But the way it looks right now, I think he's under-owned. I think he's got a good chance of success. And he's also stretched out. In his most recent major league games, he's gone on July 2nd, he went 5 1/3 innings through 94 pitches. And then he made a minor league appearance, if I'm remembering correctly. July 10th, he went 3 innings, but then July 16th, he went 6 innings at AAA, struck out 7. So he's, for all intents and purposes, I think fully stretched out, can give you, 90, 95 pitches. So I really like Patino here. Definitely willing to take my chances at his salary.
Yeah, and the other thing too on FanDuel, I really like Patino because not only is he's 5,700 on FanDuel. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of risk in terms of will he make it 6 innings or not. Although, when his price is at 5,700, that kind of becomes less of a concern. He's only projected for 7% ownership on FanDuel. That is egregiously low to me, a guy with the kind of upside he has and his salary. To me, Patino is my favorite overall play on FanDuel as well as DraftKings, but even more so on FanDuel. So it's going to be really hard for me to get away from him. I'm going to be getting to him a ton today. And that's also one of the reasons when we talked about like the Yankees before, the reason I don't really see the need to save salary at offense is because of how much I like Patino as a cheap pitcher. That's where I'm going to be saving salary today. On the other side of the mound, it is going to be Cal Quantrill on the mound for the Indians. And I don't think that Quantrill is particularly good, but this is just another one of these offenses in the Rays who are picking up a ton of ownership. We do have them with the highest odds of being the top stack on the slate by a pretty wide margin at 12.8%. But still, I don't think that 15% ownership is warranted. So once again, another offense in a good spot, a la the Braves, a la the Red Sox. Well, the Red Sox spot, not even quite as good against Jordan Montgomery, but just too much ownership going to these top teams.
I do think I'll get to Tampa a bit more than I get to some of the other teams we've talked about, like Atlanta, Boston, and the Yankees, because like you said, there is a pretty big gap in top stack percentage between them and Atlanta. They're getting the same aggregate ownership as Atlanta and not that much more than Boston, even though there is a pretty sizable gap there. So I do think I'll get a bit more of them than I will those other teams. But again, you're going to have to pay attention to the rest of your lineup and make sure that you're not getting really popular one-offs or pitching with Tampa Bay as well. Looking at their individual ownership to see if there's anything that stands out there, because see if we can just get lower owned guys into the lineup. There's really not. Every hitter except Yandy Diaz is projected for at least 10% ownership. Brandon Lau, Austin Meadows, both at 26 and 24%. But other than those two, it's still reasonable ownership. Like Mejia, Walls, Arozarena, Wendell, Franco, and Kiermaier are all between 10 and 14%. So it's high, but I think that I'm more likely to get to Tampa than I am those other teams. I do think it's a good spot for them. They get out of Tropicana. You have Quantrill, who has allowed a 227 expected ISO to lefties this year, only 117 to righties, but he's only struck out 13% of righties. So you have left-handed power with Lau, Franco, Meadows, Wendell. Kiermaier is a lefty. Mejia will hit left-handed. So will Walls. The only righties in this lineup are Arozarena and Diaz, and these are both guys, especially Arozarena, where if they're going to put the ball in play, I'm certainly willing to take my chances.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that I'll add on to that I certainly agree with is I'm going to be underweight to the field on the Rays, but I'm not going to be as heavily underweight to them as I am on teams like the Braves and the Red Sox, because those are teams who just don't have comparable top stack odds to the Rays, where the Rays are, 13%, then you get 8% for Boston, 9% for the Braves. So the ownership to me is a little bit closer to warranted with the Rays. So I do think they're a better option, at least than the other popular offenses we've talked about so far today. Next game we have on the slate, it is the Chicago Cubs at the St. Louis Cardinals. Adbert Azalea on the mound for Chicago. Kwang Hung Kim on the mound for St. Louis. Now, I understand that so far, or especially as of late, we've seen the Cubs really struggle on offense. And a lot of it has just been because of where this team is in the standings right now. It kind of looks like they're starting to tear it down. Maybe that's a little bit of a distraction, but they also don't have Jock Peterson in the lineup anymore. Kwang Hung Kim has been reasonably successful this year with a 2.87 ERA, but a little bit lucky because he only has a 3.8 expected ERA. And then you look at the strikeout numbers, 18.2% this year, 15.6% last year. I'm looking at it like this. I don't really like the Cubs in this spot, but I don't really like Kim either just because there's enough strikeout upside.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. Like, I think Kim's a decent pitcher. I don't really like the price tag on him. The lineup is still reasonable. You still don't have Chris Bryant, but at the top of the order, Contreras, Rizzo, Wisdom, Baez, they're not giving you any, free outs there. The bottom of the order drops off a bit. But the biggest issue for me is just strikeout percentage for Kim. He comes in with an 18.2% strikeout percentage. It's just tough for pitchers to pay off an $8,100 salary when they're not getting that many strikeouts. Kim's likely to give you 90 to 95 pitches, which is fine. He can give you 6 or 7 innings. But I just don't really anticipate getting there. I think if I go to either pitcher in this game, I'm actually more inclined to go to Alzolay, even though the Cubs are underdogs here, because he has put up very, very good strikeout numbers against right-handed hitters in particular, and the Cardinals just don't have left-handed bats. Alzolay struck out 29.5% of righties this year. The Cardinals have 3 left-handed hitters in their lineup. One of them is the pitcher, so I don't care about that. It's basically just Carlson and Edman that'll be hitting left-handed. So, I think there's a decent chance Alzolay can actually carve his way through this lineup. The problem that you're going to have there is he hasn't been going particularly deep into games. 69 pitches last time out, 73, 82 the one before that, where he went 7 innings. But there is some risk that they'll have a pretty short leash on him. So I don't love either pitcher here, but I think if I were going to go to one, I'd actually go to Awesemo.
You know what's funny about the Cubs versus the Cardinals is the Cardinals team in the offseason, they traded for Nolan Arenado. They're viewed as a team that's probably going to be buyers at the trade deadline just to make a push for the playoffs. And the Cubs are a team everybody's like, hey, the season's over. The team stinks. The Cubs are 1 game behind the Cardinals in the standings. It's still the Cardinals team has been pretty disappointing this year. So with Azalea, at least for tournament upside, because he has the 24.7% K rate. And then also, like you said, it is a pretty right-handed dominant lineup that the Cardinals have. I don't really like the spot for the Cardinals. Azalea won't be a core play for me or anything like that, but mixing him in GPPs, I think that is reasonable. We only have him projected for 1.6% projected ownership right now on DraftKings. Or no, that's on FanDuel. On DraftKings, Azalea is projected for it's only 2% projected ownership. So very low owned on FanDuel and DraftKings. If you're building multiple lineups, I think it's worth having more than 2% of the field on him. If you're playing 3, 4, or 1 lineup or something like that, no reason to consider Azalea. But mass entry, I think he's worth way more than 2% exposure to. Just ballpark around what kind of exposure do you think you might get to Azalea?
Probably not much. I mean, we have him at 2% right now. I wouldn't be surprised if I got like 4 or 5. But again, he doesn't project that highly. And that's something that, even though I think that this lineup sets up favorably for the Cardinals, it's still going to keep my exposure to him in check. But it's just, if I had to go to one of these two, I think the ceiling's a bit higher.
Yeah, that's so I don't really like the offense this year. Pitchers, I don't love them, but I do prefer Azalea. I think he's a good tournament option. I'm going to be overweight to him. Next game we have here, it is going to be Andrew Heaney for the Angels going up against Kenta Maeda and the Twins. It's funny with Heaney because his ownership ends up being all over the place on slates. And I think we finally got to a point where people are just like, I don't know what to do. He's just reasonably owned. It seems like every slate, either Heaney picks up no ownership or he's like 40% owned because everyone's like, look at the strikeout upside. And it generally tends to be just based on whatever he did in his last start. But today we have reasonable ownership on Andrew Heaney at 15%. I find him hard to totally ignore in tournaments, although I'm probably going to be about even with the field on him just because the strikeout upside is so good and he's so cheap. That combined with the Twins offense being a little bit disappointing this year. But at the same time, Heaney has not really delivered results this year. So Heaney as a GPP play against the Twins offense, what do you make of both sides of it?
Yeah, my comparison earlier was that this is essentially the Robbie Ray spot from yesterday. Obviously a cheaper price tag on Andrew Heaney, but you have a pitcher that has struck out over 31% of right-handed hitters in Heaney. He's going up against a lineup that will feature 2 lefties, but he's also given up a lot of power. 204 expected ISO to righties, specifically 1.67 home runs per 9 overall this season. So really, really good strikeout stuff. Gives up a lot of power. Facing a Twins lineup that has power. He does benefit a little bit. Mitch Garver is on the paternity list, so he won't be in the lineup today. That's a little bit of a benefit to Heaney. He's only getting 15% ownership right now. This morning it was 23 or 24, which was a little bit scarier. Here I could see getting a little bit overweight on him just because he is cheap and he does have a really high ceiling. But I still think I'd mostly just end up around the field because I think it's just a pretty big boomer bust spot. But I do think I'll be getting overweight on Minnesota because you do have some ownership going to Heaney. So going to the Twins, makes sense in that regard. And then it's just a really high upside spot as well with all the right-handed power in this lineup.
Yeah, so in the build I made before we started the show, not my final build, but just kind of an idea of what I think I might be around when I set my lineups. I did have 22% ownership to Heaney, so a little bit overweight. It's just the strikeout stuff is really strong for him. When he pitches well, he has such big fantasy games because he doesn't get guys out other ways. He's not a pitch to contact guy. He gets hit really hard. He does have a 332 BABIP this year, which in some respects, he's been unlucky to have that. And that's why his underlying numbers are better than his ERA with a 4.4 expected ERA of 4.19 FIP. But he gives up a lot of hard contact. So it kind of stands to reason that that's why he would have a higher than average batting average on balls in play. It's also why he has a fairly high home run to fly ball rate at 16.1%, which is right around his career average. He gives up a lot of hard contact, but he has good stuff and tends to generate a lot of swing and misses. So high variance pitcher. I certainly think it makes sense to get to Heaney. And then also Twins on the other side, not going to be a massive play that I'm like way overweight to the field, but relative to some of the other teams in this price range, for the example, the Red Sox we talked about before, 8.7% chance of being a top stack compared to 7.9% for the Twins, but the Red Sox are picking up about 65% more ownership. So I think the Twins are better stacked than Boston. looking to leverage off of Boston, this is one of the teams I'm getting to.
Yep, agreed completely there. Yeah, I like that, Heaney's going to get some ownership, so you're getting leverage against him there. And the top stack percentage is just really similar. Boston less than 1 point higher than Minnesota, getting like 1.5 times the ownership. So right there with you, I like Minnesota as a stack. I'm sure I'll have some Heaney in tournaments as well because of the ceiling. But if I could only go to one side, I think I'm just going to the Twins here, especially because you have Patino in that price range, who right now isn't getting that much more ownership than Heaney is.
And then on the other side of the game, Kenta Maeda on the mound for Minnesota against the Angels. Maeda's struggled this year. He's also pretty expensive. I have zero interest in him as an option, just relative to some of the other guys and on the slate and the results he's gotten this year. Pretty much anybody else I would rather get to in that price range. The Angels are one of my favorite stacks on the slate, though, just given that Maeda still has a little bit of name value. He has struggled on the whole for the season. And very low ownership going to the Angels, only about, 5% projected ownership as a team. So look at Maeda's numbers for the year: 4.71 ERA, 4.12 FIP, 3.96 expected ERA. He's been okay this year, but generally this is not the pitcher he used to be. We've also seen a pretty big decrease in fastball velocity the last 3 years. He's gone from 92.2 average fastball velocity, 91.8 last year, 91 this year. Consider his age at this point at 33. I just think Maeda's on the decline. The field isn't quite there yet. So as a contrarian stock, the Angels are a team I'm going to be pretty heavily overweight too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I like Maeda a little bit more than you, but it's not like a ringing endorsement here. It's just the strikeout numbers are actually kind of better than I realized for the season. He's at 25%, which is still pretty good. He's striking out guys from both sides of the plate. You get Justin Upton back for the Angels, which, he's got power, but he also strikes out a lot. So that adds some strikeouts to the lineup. And it's not like it's the most imposing lineup either. So with Maeda only getting 6% ownership in tournaments, I have some interest there. But I'm with you on the Angels too. I don't really like stacking this team because most of their hitters kind of suck, but it is a little bit better lineup now. Obviously Ohtani's great. Jared Walsh gives you power. Brandon Marsh is one of their top hitting prospects, has some power, has speed. He's only 2,500. So those guys all look pretty good. Then you add Justin Upton at a cheap price tag that has some power, hitting third. Max Stassi covers up the catcher spot for you, and they're not projected for a lot of ownership here. So I think that the Angels look like a good stack. I just think that I wouldn't be surprised if I end up getting more than the 6% projected to Kenta Maeda as well.
By the way, since it was a question that was being asked in the YouTube chat, no weather concerns today. There's no game that has really any chance of rain. The game with the most rain is 5% in the Red Sox-Yankees game, which is essentially nothing to consider. So first time in a while that we've had a slate where we haven't really had to consider rain at all or any kind of weather. So that is a nice positive. Something else also, guys, all the stuff we're talking about on the site, the Top Stacks tool today, that is free. And then we also have the Top Pitchers tool, something else that I like to look at a lot. Ownership projections, that is massively important for MLB DFS. If you guys want access to all this stuff, head on over to Awesemo.com. You can sign up for an Awesemo Plus weekly package for $29.95. And if you're new signing up for Awesemo Plus for the first time, use the promo code MLB Deeper Dive. That is one word, all capital letters, MLB Deeper Dive. That gets you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus. And if you're only looking to play MLB DFS, which there's a pretty good chance of it considering the other sports that are going on right now, you get an MLB Plus, an MLB weekly package for $15.95. So go check that out if you want access to some of the data that Adam and I are referencing as we're carrying on with the show and talking about the players that we like here. The next game on the slate, it is Sean Manaea going up against the Seattle Mariners. Now, Sean Manaea is going to be super, super popular today. He has had a pretty good season overall, but I don't know that he's warranted to have this kind of ownership. That's really where I'm at with him. Cash games, I think he's an excellent play. I think he's worth being in the player pool for tournaments, but I'm struggling to get to the kind of ownership that he's picking up right now. What do you make of him as a tournament play at his ownership?
I think he's fine. Like, he's still $900 less expensive than Bueller, who I think is, the other, comparable option at the top. Seattle's not a particularly imposing lineup. They do have some power, but overall, I think it's a spot that Maeda should have success. You're probably going to get a pretty balanced lineup from Seattle as well in terms of righties and lefties. Maeda only struck out 22.5% of righties this year, but he's struck out 33.6% of left-handed hitters. So if you're going to get J.P. Crawford, Seager, even though he's good, Kelnick, and Jake Bauers in this lineup as four lefties, that's going to be a little bit of a benefit to Manaea as well, I think. I like him. I don't think it's very likely that at 9,600, I don't think it's very likely he puts up a score where you're just like, damn, I needed to pay 9,600 for that. I do think it's pretty likely he puts up a score that you're happy with, that helps you as long as your bats come through. So I think there's enough cheap hitting on the slate that I'll get to him a decent amount. I'm not really too scared off by the ownership, but I do think he's probably a little bit overpriced if we're just talking about, his chances of putting up a monster game here.
Yeah, and then something else too that I look at Sean Manaea. First of all, his underlying numbers, he does have a 4.07 expected ERA, so a little bit lucky to have the 3.28 ERA. The main reason is because he's an 80.3% strand rate. That's something that's certainly going to regress going forward. So I think it does stand to get a little bit worse. The other thing too is the K rate this year is at 25.3%, but it was only 20.3% last year for his career, 20.6%. So I think going forward, there's a chance that we do see a little bit less strikeouts for Sean Manaea. Just trying to look at some of his swinging strike rate to see if that's been way out of line with what it has been in other points of his career. Just because I do think that there is some regression coming his way. And just given that he's so popular on, a relatively smaller slate and compared to some of the data we have on the site, like I'd rather get to Walker Bueller just from a standpoint of, and I know it's a question that Darren Singletary asked in the chat when we were bringing up Manaea. He said, what about Walker Bueller? One of the reasons I'm going to be underweight to Manaea is I just prefer Bueller as a play. Bueller's projected for about 5% less ownership right now. He is a little more expensive, but we also have him with better odds of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. Walker Bueller is also at home. Sean Manaea is on the road. I think there's more strikeout upside in Bueller. So that's really what I'm looking at. To me, it's Manaea versus Bueller if I'm paying up for somebody. And in that respect, I prefer Bueller. So I think Manaea is probably someone I'm going to have somewhere around 20% exposure to.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Like I'm not going to take I'm not going to die on Sean Manaea as the clear number one hill or anything. I'm just kind of fine with whatever I get to on him. Like my guess is I end up around 30 to 40% if he's projected for 36%. And I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, that's also reasonable. It's going to be Patino's definitely going to be my most rostered pitcher, and that's going to give me a lot of salary to play with. And I just prefer Bueller to Manaea, so that's probably what's going to drive my ownership at least what I'm expecting when I finalize my lineups. On the
in
other
general,
side,
I'm actually just really interested to see how my stuff looks because they're so like this. It's just a weird slate where it's like I don't love any stacks and I don't really love any pitching.
Yeah, and then on the other side, like I can't reasonably get to the Mariners at any kind of decent ownership either. They only have a 2% chance of being a top stack. Maybe they're a little bit under-owned because they have a 1% projected ownership, but I don't think this is really a reasonable leverage play. If you're playing 150 lineups, you want to make 1 or 2 Seattle lineups to kind of cover your bases. That's fine, but this is not a priority play for me whatsoever.
Yeah, that's agreed with that. There's not a whole lot that stands out here. Like Mitch Haniger is really expensive. Seager in the lefty-lefty matchup holds his own, but he's 4,600. I don't really love going there. I guess it is worth mentioning that so far this year, Manaea has actually given up power to lefties with a 196 expected ISO. So, a Seager one-off makes some sense, but there's not a whole lot I want to see here.
All right. Only one game left to talk. Oh, I forgot about the other side. Chris Flexon against the Oakland A's. Kind of an important part to talk about. There is one game left after this one, but Chris Flexon, he's had okay results this year, but not somebody who I think is particularly good. But I can't believe I almost skipped over the A's because the A's are overall my favorite stack on the slate. Against Chris Flexon, there's just zero ownership going here. And Flexon, while he is fine as a pitcher, the A's have a ton of power upside as a team. The only teams projected for less ownership today than Oakland are the San Francisco Giants and the Seattle Mariners. That's it. Every other team is more popular than them today. We even have the Marlins picking up 1.9% ownership. So, relative percentage-wise, that's a lot more ownership going to the Marlins than the A's. So I'm going to be heavily overweight to Oakland in this spot.
Yeah, I'm really confused why the implied run total is so low. I mean, I get that it's not a great hitter's park. I get that it's like 70 degrees and Flexon's not terrible, but the A's do have a lot of power here. But one way or the other, I agree with you. Like they're middle of the pack in terms of top stack percentage. But when you consider, when you exclude Tampa Bay, every offense on this slate has less than a 10% chance of being the top scoring stack. So Oakland coming in at 6% really isn't a big deal when you consider. So they're like 50% less likely to be the top stack compared to Atlanta, but Atlanta's getting 1,500% the ownership. So it just looks like a really good spot here. Flexon is fine, but he doesn't strike out a lot of guys. He gives up enough power. 176 expected ISO to righties, 135 to lefties is low. But the A's have so much power in their lineup as well. They are also really expensive, so they'll be difficult to get to. But you and I are on the same page as far as rostering a lot of Patino here. That's going to make it so we can get to pretty much whatever we want bats wise. So you have Olsen at 5,900. That's a spot where you can probably pay up and be contrarian. Lowry at 5K. If you need a cheaper option, you can save 2,700 by going Olsen to Moreland, assuming that Moreland's in the lineup. There's just multiple ways you can go here. You have power essentially 1 through 8. I guess you could argue that Andrus doesn't have power at 2, so like 1 and then 3 through 8. But it's a lineup that has a lot of power and is just not getting ownership on a slate where there's just not a lot of stacks that I love anyway.
Yeah, it's such a strong pay up to be contrarian spot on this slate. I mean, if we look at the overall construct of a lot of people's lineups today, it looks like overall at pitcher, a lot of people are going to be spending up for Walker Bueller and are going to be spending up for Sean Manaea and then just going really cheap at offense. The main reason that we see the Yankees picking up as much ownership as they do. And then on the inverse, because that's how people are building their lineups, if you're laying Patino and you're rostering the Oakland A's, it's just going to put you on such a different lineup construction than everybody else. Nobody wants to get to Oakland because of their price tags. So they only have a 1.3% projected ownership share as a team, but a 6.2% chance of being the top stack on the slate. So they have the most positive leverage score today. And to me, I think they're a very high priority for large field tournaments. Cash game's not a spot you have to consider them, but I'm going to be very, very heavily overweight to Oakland today. This is my favorite low-owned stack of the day.
Yeah, I haven't built lineups, but just knowing how my lineup building goes and how my process works, I would be very surprised if everything holds how it is right now. I'd be very surprised if I don't have a lot of Oakland. All
right, guys, just one game left. If you haven't done it already, do us a favor, like the video, also subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's more content coming up after us. There's us going to the MLB Live Before Lock show, and then nothing later on the day because there's no other sports going on. But going forward, lots of baseball content coming up. We also got an MMA card this week. There's always NASCAR, golf going on also. So subscribe to the YouTube channel so you know when all those shows are starting up. But last game on the slate now to get to, Walker Bueller against Anthony DeSclafani. So starting with Walker Bueller, like I said before, if I'm paying up for a pitcher today, my priority is going to be Walker Bueller over Sean Manaea. I'm going to have some exposure to Manaea, but I'm going to have far more Walker Bueller. I think he's a better pitcher than Manaea. I like his strikeout upside. He's also home against the Giants team, which while they've had a good offense this year, I think they're going to regress in the second half of the season. I don't really buy into what they did in the first half. So Walker Bueller, where do you stand on him today? And are you going to be looking to get to him or Manaea in cash games with Patino, or are you more leaning toward just paying up for both pitchers in cash?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not playing cash today, but okay. I think it would really just kind of come down to where it comes down to the bats. Like, I don't mind if I go Manaea Patino, but ideally you're getting Bueller Manaea, I think, and Morton's in there as well. Like, I think basically the cash pitcher player pool, I think, is Bueller, Manaea, Morton, Patino. And then it's just kind of a matter of what bats fit with which pitchers. I like Bueller here. Obviously, the Giants have the lowest implied run total on the slate. I don't think there's quite as big a gap. I don't like Bueller like more than Manaea, or that much more than Manaea. I don't think, like, the Giants still are a good offense. I don't think they're as good as they've been this season. They've been, one of the I think Eric said this morning, they actually have the highest ISO in the league. I don't expect that to continue, but it's still not like a cakewalk offense. So I think that, like, the Giants offense is better than the Mariners offense. I think Bueller is a better pitcher than Manaea is. So, but he's also $900 more expensive. So right now we're seeing similar ownership between the two, about 37% going to Manaea, 31% going to Bueller. I think that's about right. I don't think there should be a really sizable gap between the two. If there is by lock, I would anticipate that I just get more of whichever is the lower owned. As it is right now, I said I wouldn't be surprised if I got 30 to 40% Manaea. I expect to be around the field on Bueller too. It's just not a pitcher or a spot where I'm likely to just like jam over 30% ownership on a 10K plus pitcher. I typically don't do that in tournaments outside of guys like Jacob deGrom or, just weird slates where there's no other pitching to go to. Having Charlie Morton for 2K less, having Patino for 4K less, having Snell I can roll the dice on, having Heaney I can roll the dice on. There's enough guys here where I doubt that I'm really going overweight on these pitchers at the top.
And then on the other side, we have Anthony DeSclafani going up against the Dodgers. There have been slates where I've wanted to get to DeSclafani this year where he's been lower owned. Actually, one of them, I think, was a recent slate against the Dodgers, if I remember correctly. But the issue I have with DeSclafani, other than just the matchup, there are a lot of guys in this price range that I just overall prefer. I'd rather pay up for Charlie Morton. I'd rather pay up for Sean Manaea. I'd rather pay up for Walker Bueller. We have Patino and Snell both as more likely to be a top scoring pitcher on the slate than DeSclafani. So when you consider his price tag and the matchup against the Dodgers, he's ultimately somebody I don't really see myself getting to.
Yeah, he's kind of in that same boat for me with like Alzolay and even Kenta Maeda, where just looking at the numbers for them individually, like in a vacuum, I think they're profitable tournament plays. Like, they're not getting as much ownership as they deserve. But that being said, I'm probably just going to have lower owned bats and get better projected pitchers. That's typically how it goes for me. So maybe if I might end up with like a little bit more Desclafani than 3%, but it's just not a place where I'm expecting to take a stand here because there's just so many other spots I can go to.
Yeah, and then on the other side, we do have the Dodgers as a team with some positive leverage as a stack. Not a massive chance of being a top stack, but still 4.9% chance to be a top scoring team on the slate compared to only a 1.8% ownership share. I don't like them as much as the Oakland A's, but once again, the Dodgers in offense with power, they are at home and, finally starting to get a little bit healthier. I think the Dodgers are another team that makes sense to be overweight to as a contrarian pay up option.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully we get their lineup before lock again. I was really surprised that we did yesterday, but hopefully it happens again because Muncy returned yesterday, but we still don't know the status of Betts. We don't know the status of Turner. Desclafani's been lights out against righties this year. He has had issues with left-handed power. So Muncy, I think, looks really good individually. Bellinger certainly having his issues, but he's inexpensive and left-handed as well. But then just as a full stack too, anytime I can get the Dodgers at low ownership, I'm more than happy to do so because of the amount of power top to bottom in that lineup.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for Adam and I today. If you haven't done so already, do us a favor, like the video, also subscribe to the YouTube channel on the way out. We've got MLB Live Before Lock coming up next.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the MLB Live Before Lock show here at Awesemo.com on the Awesemo YouTube channel. I'm Eric Lindquist. We're sponsored today by jockmark. It is fantastic to have them alongside of us today. Looking forward to this slate. I think it's a really fun one. But first, let me introduce the man, the myth, the legend. Terry McBride. You know him at DigitalB21 on the Twitter sphere. Terry, how you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty well, man. Doing pretty well. I hear there's some big thing going on in the Twitterverse related to Awesemo that we're just been instructed to tell all the people about. Was that like feeding us right into that conversation? Or
I think we're like 10, 20 people away from 32,000 on the main Awesemo Twitter account. So if you are not a member of the thing, if you are not following the thing, should I say, head over to @Awesemo on the Twitter sphere. Let me pull it up here so I can at least talk about what it is that we're talking about and correctly direct the people to exactly where we need. So that at Awesemo_com, so at Awesemo_com, we are literally like 20 followers away from 32K. That would be so cool to hit while we're on the show, to feel like we were responsible for it. Another thing you should do while you're sitting there waiting for us to go on our analysis rant for the next, hour, 62 minutes. And trust me, Terry and I can fill 62 minutes of talking about baseball. We have proven things. No problem. If you guys want to stay after for our seminar for 3 hours about the intricacies of WRC Plus, we will be available to do such things. But actually hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, so you know when this and all the other content here at Awesemo is going live. Terry, you ready to get to this, my dude?
I am. I think it's a really interesting looking slate, kind of going back to what you were saying, walking us into the intro. It's just really fascinating in pitching breakdown, and I think there's some good spots for bats, so it should be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah, so it's nice. We don't have to go game by game here. We can kind of just go and hit everything we want to. Is there anything you want to address before we start with pitching?
I'm probably going to have an uncomfortable amount of Adbert Alzolay. I wrote about him in the tournament strategy article this afternoon. I think he profiles pretty well here. And I really like the fact that he's kind of slipping by the field with no ownership on either site. So I think that's kind of a sneaky spot if you want to get started there on some of the pitching breakdowns.
Oh, my. I know he's much, much better against righties than lefties. I know that is true. And so this is a St. Louis team with only 2 lefties in it, with Bader and Carlson generally, unless you were to some reason get and that's exactly what you're getting today. So that's exactly what ended up happening. Love it. If you're going to play, I don't love it because I'm not going to be playing a lot of him, but I'll let you make the case for him here in a second. Let's start on the top of the board. That's kind of the natural place to go as everybody's kind of coming in here. Let's party. 10,500 Walker Bueller, 26.2% top 2 pitcher percentage over on DraftKings, 28.7% over on FanDuel as well. Just coming in as the top pitcher here on the slate there, but getting a little bit more ownership compared to his top pitcher percentage. How are you handling Walker Bueller on this slate?
I'll have tons of him, and I'll feel a lot more comfortable about it than I do about the Alzolay shares that I was just mentioning. So Bueller, I'm always happy to roster Walker Bueller, one of my guys, one of my go-tos. 26% strikeout rate on the year. He started a little bit slow this season with the strikeout rate, but it's come up in the last handful of games, and it's approaching pretty respectable territory. He might not end up as one of these high 30, mid 30s type of guys this year, but mid 20s to low 30s is going to be fine for all purposes here. 121 and a third innings pitched, a 3.70 xFIP, a 0.91 WHIP, induces 11.5% swinging strikes. Plenty of strikeouts on the table for him here. So I really like the spot for Walker Bueller. There are the power concerns coming back the other way with the San Francisco lineup. That would be the one, the main area of concern. They're sitting 7th worst in the league, though, at 25.2% strikeouts against righties. But what they do well is they have a 4.50 home run rate. That's 2nd in the league, and a 198 team ISO in the split, which is tied for 1st in the league with the Toronto Blue Jays. They create runs 9% ahead of average against righties. So he's not completely safe, but we're talking about a pitcher who really is a safe pitcher in terms of what he does, in terms of not walking too many hitters, only a 6% walk rate. He's reasonably good with the contact metrics, only a 37.3% hard hit rate. So on this slate, I think he gives us upside and a modicum of safety anyway, when there's not really a ton of safety to talk about.
A modicum of safety. I don't know where to go with that. That was fantastic. Sean Manaea, that's where I'll go with it. We'll go to Sean Manaea here next for the Oakland Athletics in this spot. I know Greg was talking a little bit about some regression possibly happening here for Manaea, just in terms of the stranded base rate. I really liked citing that. That was nifty. I'll put that in my repertoire. 25.3% K percentage here on the season. I mean, that isn't even like scared. It's good. It's really good. I just feel like he's maybe a little bit overpriced in this spot. And because of the ownership that it is going his direction, 38.4%, obviously a little bit lesser down from Walker Bueller. I'm willing to go up to Walker Bueller if he's going to come in 10, 12% lesser owned over on DK. I'm happy to find the $900 and mix it up. What are you doing on FanDuel with him?
Yeah, I'll probably come in as an undercut to the field. I do like him. I think he's a good pitcher. I think the strikeouts could certainly be there for him in this spot. 24.6% strikeout rate for the projected Mariners lineup. He's striking out 25.3% of hitters over the course of the season. He's kind of gone back to the level that we saw him at in 2019 when he struck out 27.5% of hitters, walked 6.4% over the course of that season. He was pretty good that year. It was that's a limited sample size year.
Yeah,
it
was limited. Yeah. But it's fine. It's all right. I'll let you dig your own grave. Go ahead.
No, excuse me. I thought he had a stronger year in here with the strikeouts than I was missing.
I know.
There. So yeah. So that's scratch that. So he's pitching better actually in terms of the strikeout rate than we've seen from him over the course of time. He's been in the low 20% range through most of these seasons, but he's had effective years where he's keeping guys off base. So he's pretty good in terms of not permitting too many free passes, too much sequential hitting against. 5.5% walk rate on the season this year, 12.2% induced swinging strikes this season, decent with the contact metrics. So I like him to have a decent start here, but it's just the ownership is kind of untenable. I don't love him at 9,100 on FanDuel. 9,600 on DK is really starting to push it. He's more of a pitcher I'd be inclined to get to in the 8,000 somewhere on both sites. So I'll pay for him here. I'll take some shares just because it is that weird kind of a pitching slate, but I don't know that I'll be at the Fields level with him.
All right, moving our way on down the board. Anthony Desclafani, Kenta Maeda, Charlie Morton. Obviously, Charlie Morton by far getting the most ownership out of that grouping. I'll hold off on Alzolay as we're moving our way down here in DK salary. I'll hold him off for a little special conversation because he is your guy today, and that is he's your guy, and that's terrifying. Okay, between those three though, Desclafani, I think everybody's kind of going to pass on it for the most part, even though a decent enough top two pitcher percentage. I mean, 13.5, maybe some leverage there to be had. Kenta Maeda, I just never like playing, and the Angels getting Upton back. It's not even that. It's just I don't like playing Kenta Maeda ever. And then looking at the next guy on the board there, the main attraction, Charlie Morton. Who are you kind of preferring out of that grouping?
Yeah, I think Morton makes the most sense in a vacuum at the very least when we're talking about the pitching projection. I've got him higher up on the board. He's coming up higher on our top starters tool. I've got it looking pretty similarly on my board where it's Morton and then Maeda and Desclafani kind of right next to each other a little ways down. And they're further down the board than I'm really comfortable with playing. Desclafani is a guy I've gotten to a couple times this season. I just don't really love the spot against the Dodgers. I tend not to try and attack some of the best offenses in baseball with mediocre pitching, and I think that's what we'd be doing there. So I don't really need him, particularly not at 9,900 on FanDuel up against the Dodgers, 93 on DK. That's just a weird misprice to me. Maeda is a guy that I think is at least a little bit more interesting. I liked him a lot more last year when he was, that's silly to say, when he was pitching really well, I liked him a lot more. But I think there's still maybe a little bit of quality there. I just don't know that I would throw him at this spot. I'm getting some decent home run numbers on some of the Angels guys in my home run model here. The obvious names through the middle with Ohtani Upton and Jared Walsh there. It's not the greatest lineup as you depart from those guys and head down the lineup, though. There are some strikeouts available for him. So if Maeda's on form, I don't completely hate it. He's still striking out 25% of hitters this season. 3.93 xFIP. I know he's had some struggles. He's a 1.36 whip, putting way too many guys on base, an uncharacteristic mark for him. Still induces 13.9% swinging strikes. Decent enough with the contact, 38.8% hard hit rate and 88.2 mile an hour average exit velo. He's okay. I'm not excited about it, but if I had some shares of it, I would take them, I think, for the price. But really, it would probably be more about the Morton spot. Philly is a little bit worse than their reputation, I think, in terms of creating runs, particularly against right-handed pitching, 10% below average against righties, 3.51% home run rate, and a 160 team ISO, right around the middle of the league, right around the average on those marks, and a 23.8% strikeout rate against righties. So I think there's something there to like there about Morton. Not the highest projected guy on my board either, though.
So we got a question here in the YouTube chat, and I think it's appropriate just because we covered them all. He asks, in FanDuel, in a low-dollar single-entry tournament, would you go Walker Bueller, Sean Manaea, or Charlie Morton? I mean, for me, I think you have to have the context of what the stack you're playing alongside of it is, or stacks, plural, over on FanDuel, 4x4, 4x3 in some regard. But what would your choice be between those three?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important part of the question because we're talking about guys who are at three very different prices. You could argue that Manaea and Morton are close to one another, but you could do something significant probably with that $300 savings in terms of getting from one bat to another in a stack, or maybe even paying for a completely different stack. So it really depends what's going with it. Total vacuum about everything else, it's Bueller for me. He's at the top of the board. He's the lowest owned out of the three. I think that makes a lot of sense if you're not completely damaging what you could potentially do with bats by going to him. So that would probably be my vacuum answer.
Yeah, don't play Bueller with Rays. How about that? That seems like the chalkiest of the chalk things that you could do with your life today. I mean, What did FanDuel do with the Rays bats where they decided, you know what, Brandon Lau, you'll be 3.1K, but everybody else, you should be under 3K today.
Yeah, you gotta love FanDuel's pricing algorithm, or the guy that they've got locked in a closet.
Hey, you're the defender of the FanDuel people. You are beating the drum for FanDuel. I'm saying
I beat the drum for playing on the site because of all these mistakes, because of all these ridiculous things that they do. I think it's advantageous. I actually think that the game is more interesting and more strategic on DK, where you're rostering 2 pitchers. You have to play every position on the diamond, because why would you just not be able to play catchers? I don't understand that, but that's FanDuel true. For you. So I think there's some edge in the mistakes and the leniency that FanDuel has.
Well, before I go ad ready on the people, I want you to talk about your guy. I'll talk about my guy here in a minute. It is not the same as yours, but you're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy. Adbert Alzolay, talk to me about him.
I like the price to start with, right? We're talking about a kid who is significantly underpriced to some of the high-end competition. 7,400 on FanDuel, 8,400 on DK. Kid who is striking out 24.7% of hitters. We're talking about guys across the board today where that's around the number for the highest end guys. I said Walker Bueller before. I cited his. He's only at 26%. So I think there's plenty of strikeout capability in the kid's arm. 82 and a third innings over 16 starts. He doesn't give you the depth that you would want. That's my bigger concern here. I think he's more reliable to give us a full start than Patino probably is, who we haven't talked about yet. No, I'm guessing is probably your guy. And I think he's more likely to give us a little bit more length, more experienced kid. I think there's just more to like there. I'm really concerned about some of the hard hit. 42.7% hard hit rate is not good. 11.1% barrel ball rate, also not good. He makes up for it a little bit in the strikeouts with keeping some of the sequential hitting down. There are some key strikeout guys in that Cardinals lineup on the other side, but overall, they don't strike out a lot. So it's a challenging spot for him. But I do think that he benefits from the fact that the Cards lineup is a little bit suppressed in terms of what they do. They're 14% behind average by WRC plus in the split, right? They're good at limiting strikeouts. Like I said, 21.9% mark overall for the active roster is 5th best in baseball. They've only got a 3.26% home run rate and a 148 team ISO, both well below average, bottom third of the league. So I think we can pick up a little bit of safety there, maybe. We've got the possibility of some safety there. And then we've got the possibility of some upside because the kid can strike out people. With 1% ownership on him for 7,400 on FanDuel when everybody else is flocking to the Patino play, I'm happy to get a little different there and play that discount pitcher. And I don't think that the 7,400 to 5,700, you can buy some bats, but I don't know that we need that much savings on this slate to really put together the bats that I want to get to anyway.
I'm not going to deny it. It just feels strange to me. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it feels strange to you too, based on
it does. It's not comfy.
Okay. Just making sure you weren't comfy. As long as you're not comfortable rostering a guy with a 456 expected slugging, we can at least be friends then. I think that we're fine in that direction.
Like I said, that those contact marks and the power marks and everything there is concerning when you're talking about a lineup with a guy like Tyler O'Neill in it, a guy like Nolan Arenado in it, who we know has tons of power. That said, some of these guys are behind expectation for what they've done with power in the course of the season. You're not getting up to expectation out of Goldschmidt and Arenado in terms of their triple slash numbers. Their run creation is probably a little bit behind where we would necessarily expect them to be. It's ahead of the average, but it's probably behind what you would think for Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. So it's kind of an underperforming lineup. And I mentioned as a unit, as a whole, they don't perform that well. And you don't get a ton of power in the back end of the lineup. A lot of low ISOs, a lot of low home run totals. So I think it could be sneaky.
All right. Well, I'm gonna roll with a little bit. It's nice because then I have somebody else to blame when things don't go right. I know people like to do that, so maybe I should try it. It seems like fun. Also seems like fun if you guys would join Awesemo Plus, because it's a really nifty spot to be in, to be invested in, because we have the best tools and data behind the scenes. We have the best people running everything behind the scenes, and then you have us lovely people running everything in front of the cameras, but they do all the hard work behind it. And I just got to tell you, $29.95 right now for the weekly pass is as good as it gets. You get everything, the premium content and tools, the player projections, the ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, the lineup builder, and so much more. Check out the DFS Top Stacks tool today. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. the best kind of information that you can possibly have to be able to attack these MLB slates. And if you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, you can take advantage of the promo code we have for this show, which is MLB Live Before Lock. There we are. All caps, one word. It's on the screen. MLB Live Before Lock, all caps, one word. Makes us look really cool if you sign up using that. And it's really good for you too, because you get 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And if you're looking to only play MLB DFS, which I'm sure many of you are, but we also have our MMA content, which is second to none. We have so many other things in the works for the NFL season. You're going to want to be invested there. $15.95 for the weekly package. Let's get back to a little bit of baseball here for a second. I love Blake Snell today. I have a problem. I have a Blake Snell problem.
Okay.
I'm just going to throw it out there. So obviously we saw him get back off the injured list here. He only threw 74 pitches his last time out. That is the concerning part. I will say if we have pitch concerns, 7,800, that should nullify a little bit of them here as we're going along. I see 99 pitches when he pitched well, put up 5Ks against the Dodgers on June 22nd. Going down the line, 101 pitches and 10 strikeouts against the Mets, 4th of June. I don't know. I feel like at his current ownership, maybe I'm probably in the wrong spot. 31.2%. He's an 18 top 2% pitcher over on DraftKings here today, which is still 5th on the board here. I love Patino too. We're going to get to him here in a second, but Blake Snell, do you have any interest in taking the shot with me there?
I like that you surprised me with that one, my friend. And I do, actually. I really like the matchup going up against the Marlins. I think it's at least a good
that's
spot,
the other
right?
part of it too. The Marlins, 27.9% K percentage against Southpaws on the season. Yeah. Number one in baseball, only 85 WRC plus and a 143 ISO. It just comes down for me looking at this lineup, which again is god awful. The Miami Marlins are a terrible baseball team. They put Rojas up there on top. If you can get through Marte, Aguilar, and Duvall, it gets pretty darn nifty in terms of strikeouts. So if he's not walking dudes, I'd have some hope here.
Yeah, and you touched on Duvall, the biggest home run threat, the biggest power threat, their cleanup hitter there, and he's got a 30.8% strikeout rate. So he's a strikeout target when he's not hitting home runs. I think Snell's got the capability to get through this lineup a couple of times. You mentioned the pitch count, and that is the one concern. If we get him for 75 to 85 pitches, something like that, with his inefficiency, he could absolutely shoot us in the foot pretty quickly. 14.1% walk rate on the season is really ugly. And then you're talking about a guy who needs a lot of pitches to get his strikeouts. So he's just not an efficient pitcher. But if he's on, I mean, this is, he's at least arguably the most talented pitcher on the slate next to Walker Bueller when he's the Blake Snell that we know and love. That's why they brought him to San Diego, right? He is a very, very talented pitcher. He's priced down on FanDuel, especially. The ownership's not going to be there. It looks like people are going to him more on the DK slate than they are on FanDuel. So at least on the blue side, I think he's got upside. I think he's interesting. Interestingly, I've got him actually, the way that my innings projection comes together, it creates not on a third scale, right? So it's a 4.9 inning projection. So I've actually got him slightly under 5 innings.
Okay.
And he is coming up as my 4th highest projected pitcher despite that. So he's in a good spot. It's going up against a weak Marlins lineup. Like you said, they don't produce runs. They don't create runs against lefties. They strike out a lot against lefties. It's just a matter of, are we getting 5 innings out of him? Or are we getting him through enough hitters? If we get that quality start bonus in 6 innings, that's a home run of a spot.
It's going to get ugly tonight at the Lindquist household. I'm going to be so upset. Blake Snell, I just feel it coming. I feel it coming, because you look at the top 2 pitcher percentage, it's still 5th there. You've got a guy in Luis Patino who's a little bit cheaper there, 6,500. Absolutely love him as well. He was the coveted prize for Tampa Bay. They wanted him in the Blake Snell move. Looks pretty good for Tampa Bay here at the moment between all of the dealings there. Also got Francisco Mejia, who bounced from Cleveland to San Diego, he's with Tampa Bay now as well. So it's gotten interesting how that trade is all kind of pieced together, but hard not to like Patino as well. His price tag on FanDuel is especially insane, just relative to the other arms on this slate or just relative to anything. Number 3 prospect in the Rays organization, super fantastic system that they have in AAA. Number 11 prospect in all of baseball. Can we take some shots here for Luis Patino at 5,700 on FanDuel?
I think you can, of course. It concerns me. I'm most skeptical out of all the guys we've talked about his innings, his depth. I get a decent projection on him if I give him 5 innings. Based on the small sample, the innings projection wasn't coming together the right way, so I kindly went in and manually did that. But the projection I get is still not up through the roof. It's not next to like a Bueller, Sean Manaea kind of a guy. He's down in the next tier. I really like the discount. I really like the fact that he's only going 5 and change % owned on FanDuel. At the DK price and ownership, I would maybe be looking to undercut that, quite honestly. I do think it's an interesting spot. 27.6% strikeout rate in 20 1/3 innings in the major leagues this season, so far this year, inducing 11.3% swinging strikes from major league hitters, giving up a 20.3 degree average launch angle and 8.9% barrel ball rate. It's not good in terms of the home run trajectory. He's limited hard contact 28.6% in the small sample, but that's a mark that is pretty likely to go up based on the pitcher profile and the stuff that he has. Hard stuff coming in typically goes out hard when guys make quality contact like that. I'm a little bit concerned about some of those things. I do think there is a path for him to have a very nice start here against this Cleveland team. That said, there are some heavy strikeout guys in this team. There are also some very, very good hitters who do not strike out that much on this team. So guys are going to be putting the ball in play against the kid, probably going to be getting on base against him. I'm a little bit concerned about the overall upside, considering the fact that we might only get him for 4 innings, 5 innings. Do you have a different read? Do you have a specific read on like what his pitch count might be? Because I don't. I'm just kind of.
So why would he be on a pitch count is my main question. What did he have for the last 3 weeks in AAA? Was there any kind of an issue with that? Because, I mean, he got demoted. He had 94 pitches his last time out against Toronto. And I'm willing to write off everything that happens against the Toronto Blue Jays. Maybe that's why they let him keep going is, he gave up the 5 earned, but they would have been in that game to that point. They ended up losing 11-1. But a lot of teams are going to get beat up and a lot of pitchers are going to get beat up by the Toronto Blue Jays offense. So it's not really that shocking to me, but I'm looking at 94 pitches he had on July 2nd. I don't have those pitch concerns. He's also 6,500. And if you're going to go down into this range, I mean, you've got Houck down there at 5,300 on DK. I don't think you're going to probably be looking at playing him whatsoever over on FanDuel. He'd be like a quote unquote pivot, but I have no idea what those innings are going to look like whatsoever. He only had 49 pitches. I mean, that's the guy that I have pitch concerns with that I would be willing to roll the dice on if I didn't have them. But Patino, I don't necessarily have them. You do?
At least a little bit. I did miss in looking at his minor league game log. I did miss that he went 6 innings the last time out, which was on July 16th. So that was only 6 days ago. So that's encouraging. He had gone 3 the start before that. And I was thinking that he had not pitched since that start on the 10th, which was giving me a little hesitation just about, coming back from a long break like that. So with that additional start there, you do get the maybe the reliability back a little bit. So I'd still be a little bit concerned about the contact profile. I'd still be a little bit concerned about what he's done so far at the major league level in terms of some of the runs against. But there is definitely meat on the bone there. Let's put it that way at worst. And you do have a few guys that are over 30% strikeout rate in the opposing lineup. So there's definitely upside in the play, no doubt about it.
All right, let's clear out pitchers. Is there anybody else that we haven't talked about here yet? We've touched on a lot of the guys. I don't have any Jordan Montgomery. We should talk about Andrew Heaney. That seems like an important conversation piece. His ownership's progressively gone down from this morning when I did the show with Adam. Make sure you guys are checking out the strategy shows in the morning. That really sets a good base and a good foundation for your process. Big fan of those before I was here at Awesemo. Now that I'm here at Awesemo, even more gigantic fan getting to work alongside all of these guys. I can see how hard they're working and checking out the strategy show. Check out the podcast network too while you're at it. I should just say to go over and do that as well. And if you leave a review, a 5-star review there, you can be entered to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, which is about a $90 offer. Definitely take advantage of that. But let's round out Andrew Heaney, 6,900 salary over on DK. He's coming in at 20%, a little bit over-owned, but not substantially enough. What do you see with Andrew Heaney in this scary, scary spot against a murderer's row at the top end of the Minnesota order?
Optimistic. I see
alliteration. Yeah. You started with the vocabulary, and I had to get eloquent.
There you go. Very nice.
Eloquent.
I like it. Welcome to the English before lock. Very nice. I think it's Heaney's targetable for power, kind of in the same way that Robbie Ray was yesterday. He gives up a ton of hard hit, 42.6% hard hit. It's not all the way up at the level that Ray was, but it's definitely targetable with power hitters like these Twins. 9.4% barrel ball rate, 17.3 degree average launch angle, and 0.1 mile an hour average exit velo. Those are home run profiles. So there's a lot to worry about with Heaney there in terms of the contact. The strikeouts are there, no doubt about it. 28.1% strikeout rate over 81 innings in his 16 starts. He's definitely getting it done in that department. The walks are up a little higher than you'd like, 7.4%. So it kind of plays into that run creation metric that I talk about a little bit. He's not egregiously bad, but in terms of the high-end pitchers, he's got the lowest mark in that category out of your Minayas, your Walker Buellers, and so on this slate. 1.36 whip, just too many guys on base. So he's a guy I've never really fully trusted in a better matchup with a team that doesn't at least have the reputation of crushing lefties for power. I would be more inclined to look to him here. I think this is a spot where I can just kind of leave Heaney on the table. I don't really need him here.
All righty. Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. I definitely like the Twins today. They stick out really high for me. Nelson Cruz. Kepler being up in the 2 hole is kind of an interesting thing, but Josh Donaldson, I don't like Miguel Sano not having, well, as I'm talking through it here too, I think everybody's going to want to play the exact same Minnesota Twins, which makes it a little bit interesting. That's kind of the problem you run into with them a little bit. Again, I'm making about 20 lineups today. I'm just kind of keeping it pretty light, trying to figure out exactly where I want to go with a couple of these last shares that I'm trying to allocate, and thought I would just fire in some more Twins as the homer that I am, because I will be watching that game tonight, but I'm not going to do such things. We're here to make money. We're here to make good decisions. And another good decision that you want to make is checking out Jock Market. They are the sponsor of the Live Before Lock show today. If you haven't heard, Jock Market has turned fantasy sports into the stock exchange. Forget about waiting until the end of the game to make money. Jock Market allows you to buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money with guaranteed payouts for all shares at the end of each night. Daily markets for NBA is gone now. That's sad rip. MLB, NHL, and PGA and NFL incoming. You can make real money every hour, every minute, every second of every match or game. Use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players, then buy, sell, or hold during the game based on what you're seeing, whatever your analysis is. Kind of like a little bit of the live betting, but way, way more fun because it's DFS angled. You're playing with the players. So download the app to get started or use our exclusive promo code Awesemo. That makes sense. Awesemo, all caps, one word, to get a $50 bonus on your first deposit. That's an exclusive offer for anybody at the Awesemo community. So make sure you take advantage of that. That's Awesemo for a $50 bonus. And if you head over to Jock Market, if you're playing on their interface, I really do like kind of getting 2-man combos. I like drafting 2 players that might be a little bit correlated in the same lineups. You're going to see the top teams, the top projected teams, the same teams we're talking about being overowned or underowned in our next segment as we're going through the top stacks tool, which is free today. But I do like getting the 2 combination of batters. If there's like 2 guys lower in the order in that spot, like for instance, if you get Yandy Diaz and Joey Wendell or something, you can kind of combine together for $1. The upside that they have if they go yard or the correlation they have together, it just ends up working out really fun. Makes it a fun sweat too if you're watching on the MLB.com app, if you're doing anything to that regard, if you enjoy sweating the games. I can't tell you how fun it is to be over on Jock Market, reacting to things as it's happening live. So much fun. Check them out, and thank you so much to them for their sponsorship. Let's jump on over to stacks. This is kind of what everybody's here to talk about. It's 3:30. We are perfectly here at the halfway point. Terry, starting at the top end, how much Tampa Bay do you have today?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's find out. I expect I would have a pretty decent amount. I'm just crunching some lineups over here.
Yeah, they are just egregiously priced on FanDuel. It's kind of the dumbest thing ever, if I had to say.
Yeah, so
maybe not ever. There's a lot of dumb things, but
yeah, I mean, on the list of like globally dumb things, maybe not, but like MLB DFS.
We don't have time.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's 2 answers to that question. They're coming up quite a bit in the crunch based on all that pricing that you just mentioned and their positional flexibility. Several guys with good positional flex in here. So I do like the lineup. It's just the popularity is probably around some of the top end hitters that I want to get to is probably going to push me further away from that stack maybe than the public is going to be. So I think it would probably end up being an undercut for me in terms of where their negative leverage is at, even though they're the top team on the board. It's a day where, you know, going from the top team at 12% on the FanDuel board all the way down, even if you just go halfway down the board, you're getting down only to 6%. So you're only cutting that probability in half. It's not that egregious of a drop. And when you're talking about some of the top end teams, The Boston Red Sox getting a little bit of positive leverage there. San Diego, a little bit of positive leverage. You're talking about teams with, merely, 2-3 percentage points off the race. So I think it's a kind of a all things equal kind of a play. And that's where I just start defaulting into that leverage and ownership metric. So it would shave me probably underneath, but I do like the Tampa spot today.
I just had to ask that right off the bat because that is the question of FanDuel. I feel like today, it feels like where you start the conversation. And I think on DK, I mean, it's definitely come up to the same kind of range. You don't get the complete discount on everybody, but G-Man Choi ended up not in the lineup. That was kind of surprising to me. A couple of those other guys, Zanino's still out and hurt, but otherwise you got Mejia now in there. He's going to be at the left side, so that's nifty. A little bit of power in the 8 hole, but up and down this lineup, Austin Meadows, I mean, how do you not love him today at 4K on DK? It's just way, way too cheap to see that price for him. For sure. Wanted to start with them because they are coming in with the top stack percentage over on DK, but still the most ownership. I'm going to be light on them. It's going to be a painful watch for me. That's another great reason to go over to Jock Market if you can find some value there. I mean, I just talked about some of the middle ground guys that you can get to. Find some of the cheaper dudes. And if you get that home run, it's a fantastic spot against Cal Quantrill. There's no questions about that. So definitely be utilizing that over on Jock Market as well. Let's go to the next team here on the board. Should I just ask you, let's do this. Do we want to talk about each team individually, or do you want to talk about who is your favorite high end and under-owned stack on the board today?
Let's see. Let me pull.
Let's keep going down the road because now we've got San Diego. We've got that lineup. I don't know what took so long, but it took forever in order to get good things. Austin Nola now in there at catcher, 2.8K. Yay. Trent Grisham, Tatis, Cronenworth, Machado, Pham. Same dudes as always here at the top end of this. Hosmer in the 6 hole. I know it's in Miami. I absolutely loved San Diego today. I was hoping that somehow they would not end up garnering a bunch of ownership. And that kind of seems to be what it is right now. We'll keep refreshing this as we get closer to lock. But if it holds the way that it is right now, I know it's Marlins Park, but I'm happy to get to a boatload of San Diego if this ownership maintains.
Yeah, they're coming up a ton for me. They're currently the top team in the Stacks tool and Fantasy Cruncher right now. I expect that since they're not crazy highly owned, except for Fernando Tatis, who kind of just pushes his way through based on huge projections for me most of the time, I expect to get to a lot of this lineup. I think they'll come up as one of my higher owned teams when I put it in the filtering tool. I really like it. They're going to be going up against an opener, at least last I saw, unless that has changed. And then into Jordan Holloway, who doesn't offer a ton of resistance on the back end of that. 4.64 xFIP on the season. The 24.8% strikeout rate is fine, but not crazy upside either. 29.9% hard hits, 16.3 degree average launch angle, 6.5% barrel ball rate. He's okay in some of these contact metrics, but I just think the Padres are so good with sequential hitting. They've got speed. They can get on base. They've got power. They can hit home runs. There's a lot to like in that lineup right now. Anytime they're going overall as a group under like 10% ownership across the board, it's pretty easy to get to this team. They're the road team, so you get the extra plate appearances most likely. It's a really good spot for San Diego. So absolutely them. And then another team that I was going to throw into the mix, I wrote about them a little bit. And maybe I'm just a little Chicago happy today because I talked about their pitcher. I think the Cubbies are interesting.
No. When's the last time that they did something that wasn't like in Wrigley with the wind blowing out? And even then, even in that series where it was crazy. Tonight's game. Oh my God. Okay, go ahead. Give me the spiel about the team that's not trying to win games.
The spiel about the team that's yes, good point. And they're also going up against a pitcher who has, despite not striking anybody out, he's pretty good in terms of limiting hard contact, limiting home runs.
Perfect.
So, yeah, I am getting a couple of guys breaking through the home run mark anyway, and it's Anthony Rizzo, Pat Wisdom, and Javi Baez based on their prodigious overall power. I just like the top of this lineup when nobody's getting to it, with especially at the FanDuel prices. Wilson Contreras, Anthony Rizzo, Pat Wisdom, all for 3,100 or lower. You get Javi Baez at 4,100, but he's easy to roster with nobody on him. Even if you're just going to those 4 guys, you get a lot of power, a lot of home runs, guys who are performing decently, all guys who are above average in WRC+. I think there's enough there to like that even if they're not hitting a ton of home runs, I just think they can string together some hits against this guy. I think that there's enough on the bone that if nobody else is going to it, I can get to some Chicago Cubs here. And then you get guys who are underperforming but talented, let's say, a guy like Ian Happ at the end of the lineup. He's been miserable this year, but he was really good last year. He had a very nice season last year. He's got power in that bat, hits from both sides of the plate, fills out multi-position eligibility. 1% owned as a wraparound play. I'll take that. I don't think Nico Horner is all that great of a hitter, but he's getting on base at a 389 clip, hitting 321 on the season. It's only over 126 plate appearances, but the hit tool on the on base is justifying a little bit of production, no cost there. Marisnik and Rafael Ortega, sure, I can take or leave in the middle of this lineup. But at the top and at the bottom, I think the Cubbies are at least interesting when nobody's going to them there.
All right, moving our way down here as well. Atlanta, I'm not crazy high on today. I know that they seem to be getting quite a bit of ownership. It's come down and tempered a little bit since this morning, but still at 11.8% ownership share on DK. They're the third most likely here. One could say that it's negligible, but I think that they're going a little bit over-owned here in this spot. Atlanta up against Matt Moore. Matt Moore is not good. Don't get me wrong whatsoever, but no Acuna. Jock and Freeman. Matt Moore gives up a lot of lefty power. No problem going to them, but they're gaining ownership as well. It's more of just, how do you play anybody outside of 1 through 5? I don't want to play Heredia, Arcio. I guess you can play some Smith there as the catcher in the 8 hole, but I don't see a unique way to really go crazy with Atlanta today in a limited number of lineups. What are you doing with Atlanta, Terry?
Yeah, they're coming up a little bit. There's several stacks down, though, and I expect when I put it through the filtering tool, it's another one that's just going to kind of get weeded out by some of the ownership that's going to the key hitters. And those key hitters that you named up at the top of the lineup are really the only guys that are landing in stacks for me that much. I also don't really want Guillermo Heredia. I don't need any Kevin Smith on FanDuel. You can roster him on DK, but I don't know. Even at 2,300, he's getting 15% ownership. Like that's not a sharp catcher play. Guys at 214, 304, 257 on the season with a .043 ISO, creating runs 48% worse than average. You can do better. So bottom end of this lineup, yeah, really, really falls off the cliff. 1 through 5, they're good, but they're owned, so it's difficult. I do like the spot. I really like the home run upside. All of those guys, 1 through 5, are pulling very nice marks in my home run model. So if you're just home run hunting, maybe it's a one-off spot. Maybe you could jump to grabbing Jock Peterson, even lefty-lefty. Jock sucks lefty-lefty, but like you said, Moore gives up lefty power. So that's a weird, soft, squishy things meets comfortable spot kind of a thing instead of a rock meets a hard place. So I don't really know that Jock's going to be performing here for us, but at only 13% ownership, maybe that's your one-off spot. Grab a little home run possibility.
Nelson Cruz just got traded to the Rays.
You're kidding me.
No. Nelson Cruz,
wow,
my favorite player in baseball, just got traded to the frickin' F you, Tampa. Are you, God, not Cruz. Take my soul, take my family, but not Nelson Cruz from the Minnesota Twins. I love that, man. Oh, this is just the worst. That's real. That's real. Yeah, I guess he's in the works. He's not out of the lineup. I mean, I'm taking him out of my lineups. Yeah. I'm looking at chat.
Came down, yeah,
okay, chat. Yeah, no, I couldn't even look at anything. I didn't want to talk for a second when that news hit. Oh my God.
What a good pickup for the Rays. They're such a sharp organization. Oh my God.
I mean, he's in his 40s. We're not doing anything here this season.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I understand. What are we going to do with Buxton long-term here? I mean, there's no long-term. It's a 1-year deal. I mean, this is just, you want to talk about getting kicked on the nut, like just kicked in the nuts on a live before lock. This is Paul George on crack. This is somebody I love. I love Nelson Cruz. I love him. All right. Well, such is life. We're back to work.
That is brutal.
God.
Well, take a minute to mourn. I mean, that's a tough
Maybe I'm not going to watch the Twins tonight. I just don't want to. Kiss him, Eric? I would kiss him, Jordan Klein. Shut up, okay? This is not the time to be getting sassy with me. I'm not okay with this, all right? Be professional. We got a show to do. We have 849 people in the chat. Please hit a like button because I'm really sad. And it would be even worse if we somehow didn't hit like 200 likes today. So if you could hit that for me, hit it for Nelson Cruz on the way out. Wow, I don't want to play baseball today. I'm withdrawing FanDuel. That's what I'm doing.
I hadn't even really seen a lot of rumors with his name in them. Me
either. I didn't see a damn thing. This came from the clouds. This was like just boom, headlock, just took me down.
They must have been on the phone
pillow off my head thing. I'm upset. This is just awful.
That was violent.
Oh, man. Yeah, you want to see me cry live? Yeah, I'll give me 500 likes and I'll cry on stream live about Nelson Cruz. We can definitely do it.
Oh, man. Likes the way this is going. I don't know.
This is just Today sucks. Okay. There's nothing I don't have a single thing. Buxton's been on the IL forever. He's my baby. Nelson Cruz is like my favorite. You know what? Shut up, Jordan Klein. I will cry if I want to cry. Okay. This is, you're not on the screen. It's me on the screen. I'm going to do what I want. This is the show. This is the live before lock after dark version here, but it's all right. We're going to get back to stacks. Other people have lineups here. Wow. Maybe traded in the news.
Let's bring that around to the DFS slate then, because the Twins were pretty popular before that news just dropped. At least on the FanDuel slate, less popular on the DK slate, but they were a major source of roster shares on the FanDuel slate. I think taking Nelson Cruz out of that lineup is a significant ding to that lineup, and I think it might drop down some of their ownership shares, which ironically would actually make me maybe more interested in them based on their right-handed power that remains in that lineup going against that contact profile that Andrew Heaney throws in there. It's going to be a really strange lineup now too, with Kepler hitting, unless they move Kepler out of the 2 spot, but I don't necessarily know like who they move up, where they put him. We haven't gotten the new confirmed lineup yet, have we?
No, we don't. Yeah. We don't have the confirmed lineup.
That's going to be a really weird, interesting spot now.
I mean, is he even out of the lineup yet? He's not officially out of the lineup. I don't even know. I'm just withdrawing my lineups on FanDuel. I'm playing only on DK today because, I have 20 lineups in the 18, and I'm just going to live with that as my exposure. God, this is just miserable. Don't be a fan of teams. That's if I could go back and do one thing, I would just not have I would still love sports, but I would just look at it from the lens of you don't care about these dudes. That'd be great. Let's go to the next thing on the board here. Cause again, I'm a professional and we're going to keep talking about them. It makes me like Andrew Heaney a little bit more than I did before. I'm still not going to get to a ton of Andrew Heaney whatsoever, but kind of in this middle range, I am in love also with the Oakland stack. Greg talked about them a little bit more before the show. And then this morning with Adam, we were bashing Oakland because they never put Ramon Laureano up in the order. He's been batting in 7th for the last however long. Well, they buried Chapman to 7 because Chapman is terrible, and Ramon Laureano deserved to be number 2 in that lineup. Well, they moved him up there. So that was great. That was nifty to see. I really like the lineup even more as a result. You get that normal Olsen and Moreland. You have to pick one of the 2 at first base. I think you just pick Olsen every single time and you just make the salary work. But otherwise, what are you kind of doing with Oakland in this spot and any other team in this mid-range of teams that you really like?
Yeah, so I actually was just looking at the A's, trying to force them in a little bit more. I was listening to Greg talk about him earlier, and he made a lot of really good points. They're going up against Chris Flexon here. Should be a really strong spot. He only strikes out 16.3% of hitters. He allows 39.5% hard hit rate. The barrel ball rate is 6.7%. Little high, but not into that crazy high territory. 9.6 degree average launch angle is okay, but he's just targetable here. I think these guys are going to be putting the ball in play. The A's have enough quality hitting in terms of guys who can put bat on ball, whether they're hitting home runs or not. And then we know they have a ton of power. So I agree with you about Ramon Laureano finally hitting back up in the top of the lineup. You're talking about a guy with 14 home runs and 11 stolen bases on the year, 208 ISO. Gets on base at a 315 clip, so I suspect that maybe that's why he was down a little further, but that didn't make much sense because they had Elvis Andrus in that spot who got on base at a 271 clip the last few days. So just a weird lineup decision. But yeah, I really like that lineup. At least I'll say I'll include Chapman and actually Seth Brown as well. 1 through 8. I just don't need Elvis Andrus. Everybody else in that lineup I'll take.
Just so
Brown is interesting. 2,100 for Brown, Seth Brown's sneaky power.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just kind of going through the lineup. I removed Matt Chapman. Somebody in chat was asking if Matt Chapman sucked at baseball right now. I'm like, yes, hitting baseballs, yes. Still a pretty darn great defensive third baseman, but a 211 expected batting average, garbage. 375 expected slugging, even more garbage. 3.3% K percentage. I mean, the guy is not seeing the ball remotely well, not even a little bit this entire season. I don't know what's going on with him. It happened to Matt Olson last year, so it's not like it is immune to happening. So it's a tough ballpark to be hitting in up in Seattle, so I don't mind it. It's a tough home ballpark for him as well. So I'm not surprised to see somebody struggle if they're not completely on in Oakland, but he's definitely going to be at the bottom of the pecking order in my Oakland stacks for sure.
What really concerns me with Chapman is the power loss, right? His struggles with the stick started last year in 152 plate appearances, small sample, weird year. He was 232, 276 on the front end of his triple slash, but he still slugged 535. He had a 303 ISO and 10 home runs in only 152 plate appearances. Year before that, he had 36 home runs in 670 plate appearances, 257 ISO, and he was a 249, 342, 506 hitter, creating runs 25% better than average. This year, it just completely fell apart. Only a 152 ISO for him this season, 94 WRC plus, a 6% below average, and only 11 home runs and 386 plate appearances. That is a major power drop off. So it's not even for me about the hit tool and seeing the ball well. I'm concerned that the power stroke is just gone for this guy. He's still a valuable asset at third base for the defense, but yeah, at the plate, it's concerning right now.
Yeah, if he didn't have a glove, he would be in AAA right now. Is that a fact? That's a fact, right?
Maybe
they paid him a truckload of money. I apologize.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, he would be released and on a street. That's where he would be. Yeah, there's the answer. But yeah, it's been a tough ride for him for sure. I hope he finds it because it seems like he's a nice kid and obviously a magician at third in Oakland there with that huge foul ball territory out there. He's made some outrageous plays that have been really, really fun to watch there. So prayers up for the man. I'm not even here right now. I'm just randomly saying things and hoping people like me right now because I'm feeling very sad.
Hit that thumbs up for poor Eric. My God, he needs it. It's like clapping your hands to keep Tinkerbell alive in that, when she was dying or whatever that was.
It's a terrible analogy and will get made fun of more, but yes, that's kind of exactly what it is. Who are we taking into archery tonight? I don't know. Olympics. Yay. Olympics. I'm not the guy to talk to about Olympics. I cover, I think, 4 or 5 sports. I'm doing MMA tomorrow, which will be exciting, but I do not do the Olympics. I will not be following anything there. That is what you need to be checking Ben Rasa in the sports betting, premium sports betting channel for. If there are any hot leads, he will have you covered. Greg SJ1 there. Another just smart dude, sharp dude. Always love when he's in chat, hanging out there. Yeah, see, Steve McGee said Eric is Tinkerbell. See what you did? You tried to be nice, though, so I guess I won't be that upset about it. Let's round out stacks here, and then we'll get to some home run calls. Sorry to talk over you there, but let's kind of finish it out. Any other stacks that really stick out to you? For me, I'm keeping it pretty limited, not playing nearly as many lineups tonight. Thank God. That's great. I don't have to worry about it, but we've covered a little bit of everybody. The one team we haven't talked about is the Dodgers. Also some interest there. We got that lineup as well. We have every single lineup besides now Minnesota's lineup because it just came off the board, which just tells you how bad everything is. Wow. Okay. I'm sad again. Talk about the Dodgers for me.
Yeah, the Dodgers are interesting. I'm always happy to get to this Dodgers team when it seems like they're going under-owned. And really, Muncy, it looks like, is the only guy pulling a major ownership projection on the FanDuel slate. Everybody else in single digits. I am always happy to get to a team with this much talent up and down the lineup. You get Cody Bellinger. He's dropped down to the 6 hole. He's under 10% owned. He's hitting 156, 275, 262 on the season with a 106 ISO. That's not Cody Bellinger. That's not the Cody Bellinger I know and love, but I still have faith that this kid is one of the best hitters in baseball. Immense power. For 3,300 on the FanDuel slate, I'm happy to get there. You get Matt Beatty in the lineup for 2,300 hitting right above him. Those are easy names to put together. Beatty's not like a major profile kind of a guy, but he's hit 4 home runs on the season in 169 plate appearances, 259, 355, 374, creating runs 9% better than average in his limited sample. So he's easily playable, as is like AJ Pollock from the bottom of the lineup. Billy McKinney's in this lineup now, traded over from the Mets, 8 home runs on the season for him from the left side of the plate. And then you have the obvious names up at the top with Chris Taylor, with Justin Turner in the lineup, with Will Smith in the lineup hitting cleanup. I just think there's a lot to like in terms of the power that is hitting.
Oh my God, look at your screen.
What happened?
Look at the screen. Are you
Dynamite production? That is why we pay Jordan Klein the big bucks.
Too bad we don't have I need an HR. We need an HR. This is not okay. Oh my Lord, Jordan, that was very fast.
That's amazing.
That was incredibly fast and wow. Cool. That was next level. Continue on. Go back to you. Shouldn't we just talk Tinkerbell for the next? No, we really shouldn't. We have 13 minutes before lock. We are off the rails, and that is okay. A lot of things have happened. Get Nelson Cruz out of your lineups. Yes. Roster more Padres. I like the Padres quite a bit here, especially with that lineup that we got coming out there. Give me some Austin Nola at 2.8K a catcher. Really like going his direction here. I don't know what this Minnesota lineup is going to look like, but I still don't love Andrew Heaney. Go ahead and
Getting anything on the other side of that game with the Angels lineup and the Angels stack? Is that in play for you? They were on the board at least earlier in the day. And they were a team that I was getting at least somewhat interesting power marks around the obvious guys, the Jared Walshes, the Shohei Ohtanis of the world. Are they on the board for you?
Yeah, no, they're definitely on the board. And I'm even going down to Eaton. I have a complete Adam Eaton problem at 2.1K. I have an irrational amount of him today. So he's I love the Angels as well. That's another team that I'm invested in for sure. Eric Bell, my goodness. Man. Why do all the funniest moments happen at Eric Lindquist suspense? I don't know, but you know what? I'm here and I'm okay with it. I'm glad it can be a sense of, if you guys are watching our shows, I hope you watch our shows, not just for the amazing tools and content. Oh my God, he's showing it again. Oh my God, it's on the screen again.
Not just for the amazing tools and content, but what? Also for the community, for the fun, the laughs, the chuckles, the weird eating pizza bagels contests and things like that we end up on, all the weird bets and stuff that we end up on. Yeah, it's a fun community. That's what I always honestly stuck around before I started working for the site. You go to other places in DFS and in the community and everything, and as good as or bad as they may be with projections and stuff like that, sometimes the communities are just full of dicks, to be quite honest. And you get a bunch of just jerky kind of people, both in front of the glass doing shows and stuff on social media, and then also just in like the crowd. So I just really like our community. I think we've got a good group of people working for the site behind the scenes and in the audience out there, shooting the shit and making fun of you for all these various things that come up in the chat. I think it's a great community. It's a good reason to stick around, good reason to get behind the paywall and join the Slack community too.
All right. Oswaldo Moreno brought up a great point in chat here, but we've got El Negro Loco, who he'll keep you apprised. But he said, any concern for Rays players? As of right now, I do not have concerns with Rays players, but partially because I'm not rostering Rays today because they're so popular. I would love to see somebody get scratched or to have something happen with that lineup for sure. I don't see anything. I just went on Twitter here quick while Terry was going there, talking about how lovely Awesemo is, because it is the best place that you possibly can end up in the DFS space. And part of the reason why is people like Terry who take time out. They don't have to. We're not getting paid when we go into premium Slack and we're chatting with subs. The man just he lives, breathes baseball. He's so good at it. Make sure you're checking out all of the offerings with the premium Slack channel. He's in there all the time talking with subs. Become a part of that team for sure. But El Negro Loco, he will keep you apprised. If he sees anything where Tampa Bay players were to get scratched or to have something of that sort, he would be kind of the first. He's on top of all the news, whether it's weather related, whether it's trade related, whether it's anything like this. Definitely a guy to kind of be looking at. We have a question from Josh.
I would be surprised.
Go ahead.
Just to round that point off, just real quick. I would be surprised if anybody in that confirmed starting lineup for the Rays is in this trade. Not many prospect type guys. They're not trading Wander Franco here. It's not Taylor Wall. So if it's anybody, I guess maybe Mejia, but they don't need a catcher out in Minnesota. So I don't think he'd be in the trade. None of these other guys.
Choi, we need a first baseman. I mean, Kirilloff out for the year, but I mean, we're not trying to win anything right now. Yeah, we could send Miguel Sano to the Rays. Why didn't they want Miguel Sano? Oh, because he strikes out 37% of the time? That makes sense.
Sano's not hitting half his weight.
Yeah, we had a question in the premium Slack. Let's round this puppy out here. We've got 9 minutes to go. I have some drinking to do now. JD or Belly for Alaska. And I don't have a site, but which one would you prefer on a blank canvas on FanDuel today? JD Martinez or Cody Bellinger?
I would probably lean toward JD Martinez. I don't have the ownership up in front of me. I can get there real quick, though. I would probably go toward JD Martinez, just performing better current season, 307, 377, 576 with 20 home runs as compared to that god-awful line that I read off for Bellinger before. You're getting JD at a reasonable 11% ownership on FanDuel, 13 on DK. So it's nothing to be concerned about. If you can afford it, I would play JD.
All righty. Let's see. Best two pitcher combo for the DK 888. Oh man, pressure's on here. He has Morton and Minaya. I have no problem with either of them. Manaya's a little chalky for me here, but in the 888, you don't need a ton of leverage in that department. You're going to get different with your bats. What would be your two pitcher combo if you had one lineup in the 888 on DraftKings today, Terry?
I don't know that I want to leave Walker Bueller on the table in that tournament. Right? Like even if he's drawing a heavier ownership share in that tournament because more of the people who are paying up at that level are going to him and buying some of that likely safety, I think at that level I would want to play Walker Bueller and then one of those two other guys that you mentioned. I would probably go to the less expensive one there, which would be Charlie Morton.
Okay. Yeah, I would have no problem with that whatsoever either. But yeah, Walker Bueller, I would want to make a priority over Mania, but it would obviously depend on what your bats are. So I can't really tell you that exactly, but no problem with the two that you threw out there for sure. Best of luck in that thing. Hope you take it down. And then send your screenshot to @Awesemo Hall of Fame. That's HOF on Twitter, @Awesemo HOF. Let's see. Joe, we got to do homer calls. It's 7 minutes here before lock. I'm finishing up the last little bit of my lineups here. I had to take Nelson Cruz out rip. Who is your home run call? Because Nelson Cruz was mine.
Jared Walsh was my home run. I had to remember what I wrote in my article this afternoon. Pretty sure I landed on Walsh. Yeah, Jared Walsh of the Los Angeles Angels was my home run call. We touched on him before. We haven't really talked a ton about them, but we touched on, I think, the prime hitters. They get Justin Upton back in that lineup as well now. So there's some upside in that lineup, and Walsh was the guy I landed on for the home run.
All righty. If I got to go to another direction here now, I mean, I called the Chris Taylor double dong, and then I kind of like started getting cold feet about recommending him. Betts wasn't in the lineup, so I guess it still was Chris Taylor the other night. I'll take some kind of credit for it. Let's go Ramon Laureano here. Sneaky. Nice. Without looking, how many homers do you think he has on the season, considering he got demoted to the 7 hole? You'd think he was bad, right?
I said it just before. Was it 14?
It's a little bit. Yeah, it's 14. I hate you. Okay. It's fine. I'm just saying that's shocking for a guy that I thought was struggling when I was researching him this morning because of how many times he's been in the 7 hole. And 14
and he missed time.
What was that?
And he missed time earlier in the season too.
He did. He missed time as well. So it was surprising to me because we know the kind of profile of a hitter that he is for sure. Let's see everybody else's home run calls. I like the Austin Meadows home run call, but so popular here. So popular. Tatis home run. Love that. Just, eat the chalk. Love it. Here for it. I'm the chalk monster after all. Rays traded minor leaguers for Cruz is what I'm seeing here That makes a lot of sense because we are building up from nothing now. We have nothing in Minnesota. It's fine. Will Smith, Freeman. I like all of these calls. Turner, Muncy. Oh, that's a lot of Dodgers in a row.
That is a lot of Dodgers.
Throw some extra Dodgers on in the mix here. I'm refreshing everything with our ownership, with our top pitchers tool. Just kind of getting these last looks in. Is anything sticking out in your exposures? Do you have all your lineups in, Terry?
No, I'm just getting them over to the I had done it into the FanDuel upload template, and then I noticed that at least one lineup had a Nelson Cruz in there, so I just had to go in and wipe him out via my emergency exit button. So now I'm pasting him back in, and now that I've talked through it and click save, now we're good, and the lineups are going in. So I can talk a little bit about what I've got in some of them.
I would love to hear that.
So it looks like we're pretty heavy on Padres stacks, on Angel stacks, on Cubbies stacks that I talked about. Getting to some Boston. Got a little bit of Twins hanging on there despite taking Nelson out. We did end up on some of them. Undercutting the field on Brave stacks, getting to some Oakland, and then everybody else in just inconsequential shares. So those are my primary focus stacks for the night.
Somebody said Randy Arozarena. That's a fantastic call. Renfroe, Devers, Peterson. I'm liking all of these. You guys are a sharp bunch. That is for sure. Absolutely love talking some baseball here on a Thursday afternoon. There's nothing else I would rather do. So I wish Nelson Cruz well on his next voyage. May it go better than our playoffs against the Yankees pretty much every single year. That'd be nice. It's nice that I'm on a show with a Yankee fan too. That makes it extra special. What can I say? I'm lucky like that. Any pitcher that is sticking out to you that you got maybe a little bit more of, a little bit less of? Where did you kind of finish up with your pool over on FanDuel?
It's looking like it will be that forecast uncomfortable shares of Adbert Alzolay, which is going to be quite the adventure. That's going to be a make or break for me, I think. I did get to some Blake Snell, got to some Mania, a couple shares of Patino, less Bueller than I would have expected in this last filter. Not really sure what happened there. I'm actually a little concerned. I'm going to see if I can adjust that real quick. I wonder what happened there. Yeah, came up short on Bueller shares, but everything else is basically around where I expected. It looks like Alzolay just swallowed up too much of it because of how some of the high-end lineups came together around his price.
I got to do one thing here with my own lineups. We'll see if I can get all of this in. That would be the ultimate kick is that I didn't get my lineups in today too. That would be hilarious, actually. I would probably laugh about that. There's nowhere else to really go but up from here. I'm just kind of looking at the last couple things. Any questions you guys have to kind of finish out the entire night here? If anything in chat here, I'm kind of just spaced out there for a second. Doesn't look like it.
I was gonna say they can't talk to you. I know you've done this before. They can't talk to you, so you can't call for the questions from chat without being able to look at chat at the same time. I can look in there though. It looks like Patino is getting a lot of ownership in there, which is kind of expected. I think he's going to come in above our ownership projections just for how much he got talked about on the slate today, right?
Yeah, that would probably make some sense. Yeah, he's going to come in pretty high owned. You're right about that. He has to.
I just realized I've got some Padres back. We got to swap out of here.
All right, I've got 2 minutes here. Everybody get everything in. There's the official news on MLB. Headlines, the trade. Oh man, that life comes at you fast, folks. Life comes at you fast, and it's normally when you're on a live before lock show and getting Tinkerbell analogies of yourself at the same time. That's quite the day we're having over here. Finishing it out, I have a Blake Snell problem. I still have 50% of him. I wish I didn't have 50% of him. Let's get down to a little bit less Heaney here as we're finishing it out. 1 minute here left to go. Sean Manaea is somebody that I'm still trying to get less of as well. He's just kind of naturally showing up here. His ownership is inflated to around 38% over on DraftKings in the last run. I think it's appropriate. I mean, he's a very, very good pitcher, but I'm going to be lower there, hoping that he doesn't completely burn me here. Any Cardinals love? Because I randomly in this last run, I tried to do it a little bit more indicative of what we're doing with ownership. Got quite a few Cardinals kind of thrown into the mix. What do you think about them today?
Well, based on the amount of Alzolay I've got, I'm probably not going to be getting to too many of them. In a perfect world, I would have probably gone in and manually carved myself out some shares,
right?
Just at least as a hedge position against where I'm at on the Alzolay play. I was getting to power marks around guys like O'Neill, Goldschmidt, Arenado, the kind of the obvious names there.
Right.
But it is a lineup I do like. You get like a Tommy Edmonds got power and speed, like Carlson's got some pop and some speed. So I do like that lineup, and I go to them probably more than I should based on their overall performance this year.
All right. Well, I got all my stuff in here. It'll be locked by the end of this show here. We did it. We got everything done here. Oh, Blitz, you're the best. Of course you are. And is good like lasagna. Ooh, I like lasagna, Marshall White. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Jokes aside, I had a blast. I think. I don't know. If I cry after this, we'll find out. But either way, that was the Live Before Lock show. Terry McBride, any final words for the people today?
Final words from me, jokes included. I had fun. This was a good show. This was a blast to do. I'm sorry for you, pal, though. That really sucks losing a guy like Nelson off your team. So we'll end it there. That sucks.
Yep, we're going to end it on that one. We have no shows going after, but we're kind of back to our old tricks after this. Going into Friday, back to the MLB strategy show in the morning. We'll have the Live Before Lock and the Deeper Dive in the afternoons, per usual. He's Terry McBride. I'm Eric Lindquist. This was a blast. Nelson Cruz, I wish you the best. Have a great night, everybody.
I just kind of been mad that he got traded to one of my division rivals now, too. I'm going to have to see that guy already.